Did you guys know I like Family Guy?
Hey stars, I'm Stellar and so are you, and wow, I'm really going to be discussing Family Guy in a somewhat serious light. Kind of unexpected, right? I mean, it's the funny show you see on your For You page in snippets, or maybe even perfectly cut. It's not like other adult animated shows that are clearly superior.
Wrong.
I think Family Guy actually has something to it that's very unique and can't be executed in any adult animated show. What's sad though is that they kind of just sit on this now rather than do something with it. Occasionally, this bit of continuity is brought up or even expanded upon, but it's practically just a joke or two every now and then, which is sad because I think it's something worth thinking about and expanding upon. I bet when someone thinks of the most interesting aspect of Family Guy, they think of the relationship between Brian and Stewie. I agree, it's interesting, but their relationship dynamic, while somewhat original, just isn't as unique as what I'm going to talk about. See, any show can create a relationship akin to Brian and Stewie's. Okay, maybe not all aspects of it, but the core essentials. But to me, only the world of Family Guy allows for this relationship dynamic I'm being vague about to work. That's right. The most interesting aspect of all of Family Guy is none other than the relationships between Lois, Brian, and Quagmire. Okay, yeah, this sounds like it came completely out of left field. At least, if you didn't read the title or looked at the thumbnail, I guess. But I've been insane about these relationships for years now, whether it's because Lois and Brian are my favorite characters or not. I both love and hate them, which is why I both love and hate all this. I even love and hate having Family Guy occupy my brain like this, but I'm getting distracted, and I need to get all of this out of my system. What better way to start than to talk about my favorite characters, aka the ones who inspired me to create this whole video. Oh, Brian. Where to begin with you? Brian is barely anything other than the voice of reason in the first season, only being a friend to Peter. But in a standout episode, Brian, Portrait of a Dog, he's shown to really be his own person.
I'd say I'd welcome this change of pace, but knowing what happens in later seasons, I'm not entirely sure now.
I'd argue this episode makes him more like a human than any other character on the show, whether you believe me or not. He's willing to fight for what he believes in, doesn't let people demean him, and actually has a spine. Not sure you could say the same thing for current Brian, sadly. At this point in the season, we've only seen Brian interacting with the whole family or just Peter, but in this episode, we also get to see some really sweet moments between him and Lois. While I was binging the entire show, something I picked up on was just how little he smiled in the earlier episodes. Yeah, he still typically doesn't express any emotion, but I think he smiles way more in later episodes than earlier ones. Lo and behold, Brian genuinely smiles and is pleasant with Lois here. It's nice how this episode establishes that it's not just Peter and him who get along, but Lois is also a close friend to him. She just doesn't need to be lectured or talked out of anything. It's refreshing to actually see two reasonable adults have a conversation. It genuinely feels like a real relationship. I have no idea if this sweet friendship or even Brian's unrequited love was planned from the beginning. I mean, hell, Brian and Stewie's relationship wasn't, and we all know how that ended up. But if it was planned, you can really tell. If it wasn't, then this episode is really to thank for that. I mean, hey, it's pretty cool for a guy and a girl to just be friends.
And then, unfortunately, something changed.
Brian in Love is a really interesting episode that I'm always down to watch. It's revealed here that unbeknownst to Brian, he has feelings for Lois. Awkwardness ensues. Not to get sidetracked or anything, but I'm going out on a limb here to say that many of you have most likely been in the position of Brian, Lois, or maybe both of them at some point. Having someone close to you catch feelings can be really difficult, and to me, it's worse when you realize their feelings that they haven't confessed and are just worried about if they will confess, to what extent are the feelings they have, and what will happen in your relationship. Here's the thing. Family Guy prioritizes comedy in their writing, as do I when watching these episodes. I mean, I can't constantly watch Brian Wallows and Peter Swallows unless I want to cry, but this episode doesn't really laugh at the situation. Once Brian realizes his feelings, there's a guilt that comes with it, that he knows he can't feel this way about his best friend's wife, yet he still loves her and doesn't really try to stop feeling that way. Stewie may laugh at Brian for his feelings, but the show isn't claiming that Brian should be laughed at, you know? There's a difference between the plot coming to a complete halt to throw jokes at someone and someone just acting in character for the situation. There isn't even that much humor from when the family eats dinner. Brian just showers Lois with compliments and well-crafted sentences and gets jealous of a literal baby for being given affection by the woman he loves. It's awkward, to say the least. Even the jokes in this scene, like Lois using M&Ms for paprika or Stewie unhooking Lois's bra, relate back to the story. Brian is so infatuated with her that he doesn't care what she uses to cook, and Stewie is using his weakness to Lois as a way to torment him. Brian eventually decides to confess to Lois, and it's a really great scene for the way both of them act. Brian's being reasonable, not trying to force Lois into the most awkward situation, and Lois is understanding of his feelings while also explicitly telling him no.
Sometimes we should cherish what we already have, like a very special friendship. Let's say like the one you and I share, that someone like me wouldn't change for anything in the world.
Someone like me wouldn't change it for anything in the world either.
It's great. I like that Brian can accept the two of them just staying as friends, and the message couldn't be any clearer.
Say we were both drunk and we knew we wouldn't remember.
I'd have to be really, no!
Well, I did say Family Guy prioritizes being funny, so close enough?
Not how I'd end such a great episode, but whatever. You know what else Family Guy prioritizes, other than comedy? Resetting everything. Even though Brian said he wouldn't change their relationship, the writers still make jokes about Brian being attracted to and or being in love with Lois.
Oh, Lois, congratulations. Our little theater group finally has a committed visionary at its helm, and such an attractive one. That wasn't even a sentence. You were ogling Peter like a horny schoolgirl.
It's not a sign of weakness to compromise. I just think you should... Peter, stop staring at my chest.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Lois. Are you not wearing makeup?
Oh, no. I just, since Peter went blind, it's actually been kind of nice not to have to worry about my appearance. I was kind of thinking I'd try an au natural thing.
You think you have the skin for that?
Something strange about all this is how most of the time, the jokes are about physical traits of Lois rather than personality traits. I do think that's really the only way you can show attraction without it being misread as platonic, but he pointed out to his therapist what other things about Lois were attractive.
Well, she's a fantastic woman. She's compassionate and charming, attractive, well, stunning, really.
And in other episodes, he implies that he'd be with Lois no matter what she looked like.
I mean, you wouldn't have sex with her, would you?
Oh, yeah, I would.
Really?
Oh, yeah, I would do everything to her. I don't care what she looks like. I would wreck that chick.
Well, you are a trooper.
It's so inconsistent. I hate how Brian isn't acting in character here. And yeah, I get that's rich, asking for Family Guy to stick to character, but there's just so much to this relationship. I hate that it essentially amounts to nothing other than Brian being a simp. I just wish more platonic moments happened between the two rather than any of this. I guess my wish has kind of been answered because I will admit Modern Family Guy is better with this. I'd say they actually act like friends without any inherent romantic subtexts, which is probably the one and only thing I like about Modern Family Guy. And trust me, we'll get to Modern Family Guy. But hey, have you ever wondered just how bad this relationship can get? Because The Perfect Castaway shows you. It really is the episode of all time. Here's why. After Peter goes out to sea and doesn't return, his friends and family hold a funeral for him and his friends. Brian acts very sweetly towards Lois here, which is great and all, and then it's revealed that Brian married Lois.
What?
Side note, there is no way in hell Lois would agree to marry Brian. She explains it's because of how great he was with the family, but that just feels like some sort of weird trade exchange instead of her actually catching feelings back for him. The Family Guy wiki says that he marries Lois to support the family, which I think only proves my point further. Maybe I'm looking too much into this, but I feel like they specifically wrote them as married because Brian's a tragic character in love with a woman he can't have, and hey, they need to make him depressed somehow. It's unclear if they're romantically involved at all because we only see Brian kiss her on the cheek, and despite seeing a wedding photo of them, we don't know if they kissed then or not. They hit us over the head with the fact that they haven't consummated their relationship, though. By the way, Lois clearly understands Brian's feelings towards her, as evident by Brian in Love in this episode. So why did she get married to him? If she doesn't return his feelings, why would she do something that suggests they can be a couple? Are they a couple? Again, it's unclear how romantic they are. And further elaborating on Brian's character, it seems as though Brian only married Lois because Peter was presumed dead, which just seems insulting. I don't think it's made perfectly clear how long Peter was gone, but it's way too short a time for Lois to rebound. And why would he even betray his best friend? Didn't he literally say,
"It's okay? It's okay to be betrayed by your wife and best friend?"
It is later revealed to Brian that Lois is actually cheating on him with Peter, which I think further proves how strange this marriage is. I mean, that did not take long for Lois to get back to Peter. In the end, though, Brian allows Lois to be with Peter, and whether it's because he wants Lois happy or he can't have sex with her is unclear. I'd personally consider it to be the former, especially because of Brian's reaction to what Lois said and because of how wholesome their conversation is. I really like the implication that Lois knows that he knows what she and Peter have been up to. It's like my earlier sentiment on how Lois is Brian's friend and she doesn't need to learn anything from him. He doesn't need to be the straight man for her. Both of them are much smarter than they let on. or they're just extremely good at reading each other. Unfortunately, this wholesome moment is quickly ruined once the final minute of the episode plays.
So let's play a game. If you haven't seen this episode, I implore you to take a wild guess on what they could possibly joke about. I'll even let you think about it. Ready? 3, 2, it's a sex joke.
And to think, Brian, I was like a day away from having sex with you. I was gonna push those beds together and take you around the freaking world, Brian. But a nice pat on the head is just as good, huh?
Hey Family Guy writers, remember this?
Well, I'd have to be really... No!
It's insane how both of these instances are meant to be jokes following serious heartwarming moments, and yet both directly contradict each other. The only similarity is them being at the expense of Brian. He's disappointed that Lois wouldn't sleep with him and that he let her be with Peter right before she could have slept with him. I don't get why the writers want to punish Brian so desperately. I can understand why in the case of Brian and Love, he was trying to make her say yes to being with him, but he didn't really do anything wrong in Perfect Castaway. Lois cheated on him! And what a character assassination of Lois! It seems like she doesn't even have a personality outside of whatever the funniest thing the writers can create for her. I mean, agency who? I get it. Family Guy is getting worse, or whatever interchangeable argument you can use here. But seriously, that was truly the episode of all time, with a strange shift in the relationship between Brian and Lois. Since I like suffering, though, let's talk about the even worse shift in Season 6, Episode 10, the episode I jokingly call the worst one of Family Guy. Play it again, Brian. I call this one the worst one because of how unnecessary and uncomfortable it is, even though I weirdly do rewatch it a lot. In it, Brian wins an award for his writing and invites Lois and Peter to come up with him to Martha's Vineyard, the place where he'll accept the award. I don't want to speak on everyone's behalf, but I think you can very obviously tell what's going on, or at the very least, what's to come. The writers are making Peter more unbearable than ever to really hammer home how good of a person Brian is. Guys, look! He's super sweet to her and is spending time with her, most likely even doing things he doesn't necessarily want to do but knows she wants to do. The show at this point has already hinted at Brian no longer being a good person and have made plenty of jokes about his writing skills. That's why I guess, to me, this all feels so forced. I mean, Brian and Lois really had no problems or comments for each other during their time together. Brian just so happens to be acting like a saint the whole time. And what's worse is that this isn't even a joke episode that can write off any continuity errors. This is meant to be taken seriously. Eventually, Brian begins to think about trying something on Lois, which he doesn't seem to like thinking about.
Whoa. What am I doing? This is Lois, Peter's wife. How can I even think about trying anything?
That's not concerning at all.
But as they drink champagne and watch a trashy movie, he tries to force himself onto her. It's uncomfortable. Pretty much every time it starts, I have to look away. It's too real for whatever reason. And although past episodes paint him in a negative light, this just feels like a step too far. He doesn't let go, says he can't help himself, and is trying so hard to kiss her. What's worse is after the fact, Brian himself even refers to himself as a rapist. So it's pretty much confirmed that had Lois not pried him off, he would have forced her into doing something. Which, what the hell? And yeah, I get that this scene isn't completely random, because Brian being a dog is why he's acting like, well, a dog. The added regret for thinking these thoughts, the aftermath, and what's still to come just really bring this down for me. It's not funny, it's not relatable, it's just gross. Brian's love for Lois has been made explicitly clear that it's sexual, but it's romantic too, so really? Brian himself even explains that what came over him was more than just wanting sex.
When you have feelings for someone that are strong enough, you just, lose sight of the rest of the world.
Even before the comically unnecessary fight between Peter and Brian, which Forever Low is the episode for me, Brian admits his jealousy of Peter, and what he says really proves his love towards Lois is more than just attraction.
Yeah, well, you don't deserve her, you know that?
Say what now?
You don't deserve her. She does nothing but give and give and give, and you repay her with selfishness and neglect. I mean, you've barely spent any time with her at all on this vacation.
He wants Lois to be happy. He knows she deserves someone who cares about her, and Peter doesn't seem to care. That's why he's spent time with her, not just because he's in love with her. At least that's how I interpret this. I'd like to think there's still some humanity in this dog, even if this is extremely irredeemable. Honestly, his compassion, as long as it lasts, is probably the one redeeming quality about this episode. He's right, Peter doesn't deserve Lois. Early season Lois, at least. And Brian proved that if someone wanted to, they would. Not as in near assault, God no, but by spending time with her. This sliver of redemption is swiftly crushed once we reach the ending. Rather than having a typical Family Guy style apology, not unlike what we just saw with Peter, Brian simply says he feels terrible, asks for forgiveness right after, and Lois just does.
I just feel terrible about this whole thing, Lois. Can you ever forgive me?
Yes, Brian, I can.
That wasn't even 5 seconds. Are you kidding me? We can't even have a simple apology. He doesn't even say the word sorry. He says he's sorry for fighting Peter, but you know he doesn't regret what he did because he doesn't think any funny business is worth talking about and only says sorry. That sorry doesn't mean anything when you then excuse what we did right after it, Brian. Not even as sorry for Lois, though. Brian formally apologizes to Lois for his actions. She chooses to remain faithful to Peter. Are you high, Family Guy Wiki? Not a semblance of regret. He's just upset because he got caught. This, right here, is over before it even starts. And, to add insult to injury, Lois admits something insane.
But there's something you deserve to know.
What's that?
Well, it's not like I haven't thought about it.
Really?
She's thought about sleeping with him? Forget what she said in Brian in Love. Forget what their marriage looked like in The Perfect Castaway. And screw what she said in Deep Throats, because apparently she's thought about sleeping with him.
Isn't that fantastic? God, I love this episode.
Not to be crass or anything, but why hasn't she? Most likely it's because she's with Peter, and like episodes I'll bring up later, she definitely thinks about things that she'll never act on. But I call BS because she never slept with Brian when they were married. What was stopping her then, huh? Was Peter being presumed dead not good enough? Yeah, she thinks things she'll never do. But she has cheated on Peter and even cheated on Brian with Peter. So genuinely, I don't buy that she's thought about sleeping with him. But oh, it gets even better. Brian, who hasn't apologized to her, pushes even further and asks her what these thoughts are like. You are clearly overstepping your boundaries, dude. Even worse, she tells him. Guess we really yada yada what happened 5 minutes ago, huh, show?
Okay, anyway.
Another thing that stood out to me about this episode, in terms of Brian specifically, is this focus on alcohol. Multiple times throughout the show, he is referred to as an alcoholic, and his reliance on alcohol can even be viewed as a hobby or a personality trait. He says alcohol is what fills the void in his life alongside the other family members' hobbies and activities, and I never met the dead man.
Lois has her knitting, Chris has his video games, Meg's learning how to drive, and me? I like the sauce.
Scarily, however, we see Brian utilize a tactic to coerce someone into having sex. Getting them drunk. I can think of 2 other times that he wants Lois drunk, but we'll get to that. Alcohol is certainly correlated with his love life. Think about all the times he meets someone at a bar, or how his depressive habit leads to him meeting someone that makes his life better. I think a majority of his love interests have some relation to alcohol, like the Bachelorette Brooke being on a show that allowed Brian to drink all the free alcohol he could before falling in love with her. Other examples are Pearl, who he met after doing community service for driving under the influence, Lauren, who he met at a bar after meeting Jillian's fiancé, Rita, who he cheated on with someone he met at a bar, Ida, who he met at the Marriott Hotel bar, Kate, who he met at a bar, Jess, who he met at a bar, and I'd argue even Bonnie, because they kissed after drinking at her 46th birthday party. Even more damning, despite Brian not actually loving her, is how he got involved with Meg twice when under the influence. The first instance, in the Cleveland Red Quagmire, had Brian randomly hit on her.
Listen, you're 17 now, right? I was just throwing it out there. I was thinking, if you ever want to, I don't know, screw around or something. Hey, Joe. It's just something to mull around the old noggin.
And the second time was when he actually kissed her in Barely Legal, which is an inaccurate title since she's actually 16 or 17 here.
Isn't it awesome that he was only with her when she was underage?
He's not interested once he sobers up, but both these times show a clear interest only when he's drunk. This could be him using Meg as a replacement for Lois too. I mean, she's Lois's daughter after all. She's practically the next best thing. Gross. What I'm suggesting is that, intentional or not, Brian's love life is directly related to alcohol, and it really does feel intentional. It can be obvious in the sense that loneliness leads him to drink, but aside from loneliness, he also tries to meet people at bars. I get that a common way to meet people is at bars, but after seeing what happened in Play It Again Brian, I wonder if this is intentional on his part. Him being drunk is more relevant than Lois being drunk, though. When he's drunk, it helps take the pain away, and these flings and girlfriends he has are only temporary, so alcohol may be a way to get people to sleep with him, but perhaps also a way for him to push aside his love for Lois.
Okay, this may seem like it came completely out of left field, But have you guys heard of Family Guy Live in Vegas?
It's an album from Family Guy featuring plenty of songs that are completely original and aren't heard in the show. One of these songs is Dear Booze, a song Brian sings about his love for alcohol. One line in particular stands out to me.
When a love is unrequited, when she brushes off my wounds, you are there to mend my fluid friend. Thank you for it all, dear booze.
Like I've pointed out earlier, alcohol really is a mainstay in his love life. It heals him, it keeps him going. Obviously, this could just be a creative way to discuss him being an alcoholic, but a love that's unrequited seems significant. It could be any love that he has, but the main unrequited love we're aware of is Lois. Initially, I didn't think this line was about her, but now I'm kinda convinced of it. Even if his drinking is a way to push aside his feelings for Lois, it doesn't always work. Occasionally, when he is drunk, we see him interested in Lois, like in Peter Caviar Eater and Stewie Be Good.
So I guess technically that makes you available.
What?
Lighten up, Toots. It's a party.
I can't believe you saved all this.
Lois. You think Lois will like these?
You love Lois.
Shut up.
So alcohol doesn't seem to be a successful form of escapism like he thinks it is. It's probably one of the only methods he tries anyway. Now, I don't think the writer sat down and thought about this, how alcohol is so intertwined in his life and how that therefore correlates to love. Obviously, drinking relates to loneliness, and loneliness relates to love, but I guess to me, I see this as more than that, even if the writers don't. Alcohol being a main reason why Brian is able to find love feels intentional. This reliance on alcohol is what makes love come to him, and it's what makes relationships work. I think consuming alcohol, which leads to him getting lucky, is a driving force behind Brian's drinking, even outside of his disease. I cannot say that Brian wants people to get drunk so he can take advantage of them, especially because he's usually drunk too, but I think that it's possible. I think Brian, whether he realizes it or not, takes advantage of the woman he sleeps with. Not in a calculated sort of way, but in the sense that he knows what to say or do in order to get with someone. He's a tryhard, yeah, but if it works, it works. I don't think he's trying to get someone drunk to hit on them, but it just works out that way. In this case, though, I could argue that he is trying, because he doesn't act like his drunk self once, offers Lois more champagne, and we can see that his glass is still relatively full. Her being drunk allows him to try something, and him not appearing drunk while she says that her head is swimming is really creepy, actually. This doesn't read as two drunk adults doing something stupid, but rather an intentional move to not drink a lot while offering more alcohol to someone else. And I did not appreciate noticing those tiny details because it makes the scene so much worse. And this sort of experience isn't common for Lois. She, on the other hand, is someone we pretty much never see drunk. It happens, sure, but it's extremely rare.
I sort of figured this out making my Copacabana edit. There weren't a lot of clips where she appeared to have drunk herself half blind.
I think the reason why she was like that in the movie was because, like I've said before, she's pretty much never like this. That's the joke, get it? Peter's the responsible one, and Lois is the stupid drunk. Going back to Brian potentially wanting Lois drunk to take advantage, the first of the two instances I brought up earlier was actually from Brian and Love. The emphasis being on both of them being drunk isn't exactly the same as what I saw in Play It Again Brian, but it still feels relevant. This suggests that Brian knows he can only score with her when both of them are drunk. The second instance came up from the notes I was taking while watching every single episode. A certain conversation from Dammit Janet struck me as odd.
Oh, I'm so bored. Without Stewie around, I have nothing to do.
Well, we could get hammered.
Oh, it's too early for me, but you go ahead.
This stood out to me, obviously, since alcohol is yet again involved between the two of them. Because no one else is in the house except the two of them, it feels a bit strange to me that he'd want to get drunk with her. Of course, he could have just wanted to have fun with her with no romantic or sexual connotations. But still, it makes me wonder if he only wanted them to get hammered so that something could happen. Is that not what happened in Play It Again Brian? The only difference seems to be that Brian would also be drunk. I also think isolation ties in with this idea, especially because these instances have Brian and Lois completely alone. A certain instance of the show actually made me slightly worried for that reason alone, that being Brian buying Lois cruise tickets for her birthday. Lois believes that this gift was for her and Peter to use, but it's made clear that Brian wanted to go with her.
Peter, what are you angry about? You get to go on a cruise with me.
What?
What?
Well, yeah, you didn't think Brian meant for me to go with him, did you?
great.
Because we also see the two of them alone in Play It Again, Brian, while it isn't intentional, I don't like the implications of what can happen when it's just the two of them. Yes, Stewie Kills Lois takes place during a simulation, but I still think everyone acts in character during this. Outside of simulations, Brian does other creepy things when seemingly no one else is around, like grope her or try to seduce her, so I guess that's why such a gesture would make me raise an eyebrow. This is also the same episode that has Brian openly fantasize about Lois, so that's probably another red flag for me. I think after an episode like Play It Again, Brian, the writers decided they couldn't do much else with Brian other than the simple jokes that pop up every now and then. He did say that it won't happen again to Peter after all, even if that's obviously not true. He still loves her, he certainly lusts after her, and that's pretty much it. But believe it or not, Brian actually gets to kiss and sleep with her. Kinda. Let me explain. In Switch the Flip, Brian and Stewie get into some body swap shenanigans. It's established during the middle of the episode that Brian wants to body swap with Peter because Lois is trying to improve their sex life.
Brian, you've got to help me. Lois signed us up for some perverse PP-related class on the female orgasm. She's crazed.
Wow.
You've got to get here with a machine so I can fix it. Right, so I can take your place in Peter's body.
Because Stewie is in Peter's body, Brian wants the Switch not only to undo every other switch, but because he wants to get with Lois. I mean, Stewie is quite literally telling him how to make that possibly happen. Brian, in Chris's body, has to use instructions Stewie gives him in order to swap everyone back. He succeeds in this right before anything bad happens with Stewie and Lois, thankfully. And hey, once the swap occurs for the final time, things seem to have returned to normal.
You didn't listen to a word Dr. Johann said, did you?
No, I did not. I mean, the movie Roadhouse.
Yep.
That was Brian! He got what he wanted! And Lois doesn't even know! That's not weird or creepy at all! What sucks the most is that this certainly won't matter in the long run, since this is clearly for comedic effect. He kinda wins, sadly enough. Kinda because he wasn't really himself, but he probably doesn't care about that. If what Lois admitted in Play It Again Brian is true, I'm sure she's no longer thinking those kinds of thoughts. That sort of thing isn't exactly something you can forgive and forget.
But hell, neither is assault, and that was forgiven and forgotten, so what do I know?
But yeah, that's pretty much it for the major changes in Lois and Brian's relationship. It's still the same simple jokes they've made before, nothing all that shocking. Obviously, the first half of the show's run made more jokes and references towards Brian's love of her than the second half, but it is interesting to me just how consistent this is. Outside of these big central episode premises, I still want to bring up a few other examples hinting at Brian's attraction. These are sort of honorary mentions, not really worth diving into, but still worth being brought up. I mean, I took extensive notes on every little thing about them when watching every episode, so I kind of feel obligated to bring some of this up.
I also don't know how to incorporate them naturally. So...
I know I brought up earlier that Brian's unrequited love could have been random and not planned out, but I do find it interesting how in Season 1, Episode 4, Mind Over Murder, Brian says this.
Ooh, there's only one thing the guys want to do, Peter, and that's ogle your wife. I tell you, if Lois were my woman, I'd keep an eye on her. Then again, I'm the jealous type.
If Lois was your woman? Interesting. Contrary to what he just said, though, we see him watching Lois perform.
Something troubling you, Peter?
Oh, no, nothing. Just all my friends are eye-humping my wife.
Dude?
Yeah, you'd keep an eye on her, alright. Is Brian not also eye-humping Lois? Is he trying to convince Peter to be worried? Either way, I think the seeds are planted here, intentional or not.
If I had a nickel for every time I'd bring up Family Guy Live in Vegas in this, I'd have 4 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it's happening 4 times.
Brian sings a song for the album called Slightly Out of Tune, otherwise known as Jezzafinado or even Off Key. Once he finishes, he and Lois talk for a bit.
Oh, that was lovely, Brian.
Huh, great, thanks. Was it lovely enough for you to,
No, I will not make out with you.
Got it, won't ask again.
So, this conversation suggests that Brian has asked this before, right? The emphasis on again, while implying the future, could also mean that he actually has asked this again and again, or at least I find it strange that Lois knew exactly what he wanted to communicate to her. Knowing what the show is like, I think we all know that he will keep asking her things like this again and again and again. The Cleveland Loretta Quagmire has the whole it's okay to be betrayed by your wife and best friend thing that I brought up already. I totally get that it was meant to be a joke, but wouldn't Peter remember Brian doing that? In Play It Again Brian, he seems completely unaware of Brian's affections towards Lois.
It's pretty hard to forget something like your friend slapping your wife's ass, but maybe that's just me.
Peter is close to being the guy who watches though, so maybe he's actually into being cucked. Breaking out is hard to do actually has a W Brian moment? I'm shocked. He starts to figure out that Lois might be stealing and actually covers for her when Joe is there. This is an actual friendship moment, and I'm including it in this section because screw you, I like wholesome moments. I also think that since the basis of Brian's attraction isn't just sex, it should be included here. He's doing this because he cares for her, and that's also why he tells her that she needs to stop and helps her return everything she stole. I don't think either one of them really need advice from each other, but this, Lois's relationship advice in Brian Walls and Peter Swallows, and even Brian reassuring Lois in adaptation are still sweet to see nonetheless. I brought it up earlier, but sibling rivalry has Brian reveal that he would be with Lois no matter what she looked like. It goes against practically every other joke suggesting that Brian only cares about Lois's looks, so I find it interesting how they are now switching up their style to make Brian look slightly better. I mean, Peter doesn't even want to sleep with her. And hey, not to be that person, but wouldn't this mean Peter knows Brian has a desire to sleep with Lois? If so, why was he surprised and play it again, Brian? He may be an idiot, but seriously? No, I'm not mad at the inconsistencies. Prick Up Your Ears actually has Brian confess his feelings for Lois, but it's played off as a joke. She's trying to explain just how awesome sex is, and Brian, lusting over Lois, enjoys hearing that.
You remember when we had that old car with the bad shocks and I used to take the old dirt road on purpose? Meg?
I love you.
I feel like I should say more about this, but that's pretty much it. He says he loves her. Seems relevant for this section. Anyway, this was already mentioned for isolation, but I really want to hammer home the good parts of Stewie Kills Lois. Even though he wants to isolate her on a cruise and we see him acting like a freak about her, we still see how he's desperate to prove Stewie killed Lois. I don't think someone who only lusts after someone would care this much about them. He wants justice for her, so I'm glad that he actually cares about her enough to try and incriminate Stewie. The banned episode of Family Guy, Partial Terms of Endearment, has Brian outright tell Peter that he's not going to have a freeway with Lois and her friend Naomi, but not for the reason you expect.
Lois isn't even into women. She just had that one experience in college with that girl Naomi.
Actually, Mr. Smart Guy, she's expressed multiple times before this that she's been with women. She is into women because throughout the whole show she's proven that, and to me is clearly bisexual. Labeling aside, Brian then is informed that a freeway might actually happen.
Naomi's the one who's coming. Let me stay. Yeah,
genuine question. Why are men into two women together? I have never once understood it, and you cannot make me understand it. Brian clearly is into Lois here, right? He wants her to be asexual with Naomi, which I guess is a turn on or something. Whatever, I want to move on. Joe's revenge is probably the worst thing Brian has ever done, followed by his actions in Play It Again Brian. Once he spots Quagmire's cat on Lois's chest, he replaces the cat and gropes her while she's sleeping.
Meow. Purr. Purr. I think you're dreaming.
No, I'm not.
You know, I never thought I'd say this, but at least in Play It Again Brian, he does somewhat regret what he just did and kind of called himself out on it.
He doesn't apologize, and he probably apologized to Peter because he was caught, but here he doesn't even try to apologize. He wants to get away with this consequence-free. What a guy! High School English has Brian and Lois technically as a couple. They aren't themselves, they are Jay Gatsby and Daisy Buchanan, but it's still their personalities in a sense? I don't know. Real quick, I just want to add that I actually read The Great Gatsby for the first time recently, and it was mid for me. I genuinely do wonder if watching this episode ruined the book for me, and that isn't a sentence I thought I'd say. Can they make a Gone Girl parody? I'm extremely obsessed with that right now. Anyway, that same sort of dynamic happens in V is for Mystery, except they're Dr. Watson and Constance. Both instances have them act in love with one another, but I'm not sure if I'd count this as how Brian and Lois really feel. I mean, Lois does not actually love Brian when she's Constance, but still, they were fiancés. I'd say while they are couples, Brian is somewhat in character here. It's harder to say for Lois. Family Guy Light has Brian believe Lois is cheating on Peter after reading her erotic novel, and he wants her to cheat with him. Isn't that shocking? I keep using the word awkward, but there really isn't a better way to put it. I mean, Stewie is literally with him the whole time. Brian even tells Stewie about Lois's novel.
Don't you know what this is? It's a description of her every fantasy and desire. This could finally be my key to— What? Banging my mom? You know, you are the worst.
It's a huge misunderstanding, naturally. She isn't actually cheating, she just sometimes fantasizes about this guy, Horatio, being with her. Note that this is an instance of her thinking something without actually doing it. that will be super relevant later. After Brian explains what he thought was going on, she calls out Brian, which, you know what, hell yeah.
Wait, let me get this straight. You, without asking, read something I wrote? Then thinking I was revealing all my most intimate wants and desires, you thought that you could exploit what you read to seduce me? But when you thought I might be cheating with someone other than yourself, you found that and only that morally objectionable? And you bring Stewie here who doesn't understand any of this?
He deserves all of that. Even though Lois's relationship with Brian shifts throughout the series, I can appreciate the fact that she's not going to be with him. And she also doesn't let him get away with these things, which is just fantastic. The Lois Quagmire has Brian somewhat acting genuine towards her. He is weary of Lois going out to her reunion with Quagmire, but she assures him that she knows what Quagmire is like and will just reject him. I could see him asking to go with her as just a sweet gesture, but I could also see it as Brian wanted a chance to be alone with Lois. Either way, his concern with Quagmire is appreciated. Single White Dad has another "Dear God, put me out of my misery," which is what I'm calling awkward now, scene with the two of them. Brian is weirdly super forward with his feelings towards Lois, which isn't totally out of character for him, but I'm surprised he felt comfortable enough to insinuate he and Lois try anything. That's something the recent seasons have done more of, I've noticed. This very explicit want, rather than him hinting at his attraction. The strange thing about this scene is that Lois goes along with it. Obviously she doesn't return his feelings, but she never messes with him like this. The only other instance I can think of when she messes with him is in A Fistful of Meg, but that seemed more like Peter tricking Brian than her doing it. Yet again, luckily enough, she calls Brian out.
This English patient enough for you?
I don't know, I never saw it.
Every door you walk through isn't a scenario you've typed into the search bar of Pornhub. This is real life, and it stinks.
We love to see it. Get him again for me, Lois.
But hey, not to be that Family Guy fan, but again, Brian has said that he would do Lois no matter what she looked like. And this coupled with the toenail scene from earlier this season really goes against that. Just so we're clear though, body hair on women is not gross. I'm 6'4" and a feminist, by the way. A very recent example is season 23, episode 16's Cool Hand Lois. Side note, this episode is so strange. Gun to my head, I could not tell you how I feel about it. It was funny, it wasn't funny, it had continuity.
Jimmy Connors.
Jimmy Connors. You saw Jimmy Connors. It happens to every girl their first time.
It didn't have continuity?
When you ride a bike, you're just going out for exercise?
Yeah? You remember when we had that old car with the bad shocks and I used to take the old dirt road on purpose?
There was Yuri, there was Yowie.
At least this episode forever confirms that Peter and Lois are bi for bi.
Anyway, in this episode, Lois and Bonnie start dating. Kinda surprised they blatantly announced this to everyone, but whatever. Kinda like Brian's reaction in Partial Terms of Endearment, he loses his mind. In a literal sense this time around though. At least it wasn't like Chris who freaking shot up like a rocket out of the house. He even landed next to Quagmire, who presumably just experienced the same thing, and... Wait a minute. Quagmire and Lois... You know, he and Lois do have an interesting relationship too, huh? He also has a relationship with Brian, doesn't he? So, who else but Quagmire? A sleazy guy, constantly sleeping around, and someone who'd do anything for sex. He'll be with anyone or anything. He's a sex offender, I guess, would be the central theme of what I'm trying to get across here. It kind of felt like they eased off the sex offender content for him, especially because they joke about what he used to be like, but there's been a sudden resurgence of him acting creepy. So someone like him probably doesn't love any one person, right? Well, you'd be wrong. In I Take Thee Quagmire, Quagmire falls in love with Joan, a maid who was working for the Griffins. He really seemed to be attracted to her, not only for her looks, because once they get married, he changed completely into being a mellow sort of guy who enjoys being with his wife. He's happy? He goes back to being his old self, thanks to Lois's body, and his wife goes psycho on him, which, what the hell, sure. Even though he regrets being with her and goes through trouble to escape her, he still wants to be with her corpse right after she dies.
Because of course he does.
Pretty much his whole personality can be blamed on loving one woman, too. Kinda. He still wants to be with Cheryl Tiegs, described as the one that got away in Jerome is the New Black, after Brian had imitated her in an attempt to hang out with him. We've known before that episode that he was attracted to her because he picks being blind so that every woman he's with could be Cheryl in The Perfect Castaway, and has a picture of her hanging up in his house in A Mission Impossible. He also wants to be with her in And Then There Were Fewer, which is why he doesn't like James Woods. He stole her. Brian even rubs in Quagmire's face that he's with Cheryl Tiegs, which greatly upsets Quagmire. He probably still wants to be with her, but the whole reason they didn't last is because he was crazy jealous, and considering how their last interaction went, he's still jealous and she's not interested. He was also monogamous with his coworker from Winter Summer, a K-drama he was in. Once the gang flies to South Korea, the two reunite and even decide to stay together.
Quagmire was fully willing to leave his life in Quahog behind for this woman.
Not even a song from his friends can convince him to fly back. He does eventually decide to leave once he realizes what it's like to live with her, though. He also dates a woman named Carrie and must love dogs. Their relationship was super basic, though, especially because they met during Halloween and only talked for a little bit. It didn't really seem like he was super in love with her, especially once they started living together, but nothing suggests that he cheated on her at all. He was even willing to pretend to like dogs and marry her, so yeah, he seemed to care a little bit. Very recently, however, he dated Elle Hitler, who was one of my favorite background characters. Their relationship in this is weird, and the episode itself seems to not comply with literally any other episode of Family Guy, so I'm going to move on. I literally have nothing of substance to say about this episode other than the fact that she out-giggities him, which bull crap. Here's where things get interesting. I'm not quite sure if this counts, but I do want to give an honorable mention to Meg because their relationship is weird. I don't think he actually loves her, but I cannot just ignore all the weird things that happen between these two. He first expresses interest in sleeping with her in the Thin White Line when he asks if she's 18. She wasn't. That's literally all he wanted to know. Which, not to be that person, but why would that stop him? He has slept with people underage, tries to get with underage girls, and makes people seem legal when they clearly aren't. It's suspected that he's going to try and sleep with Meg in Barely Legal, and sure, he doesn't, but that doesn't change the fact that he undresses in front of her, gives her relationship advice, and calls her a young woman. Yeah, I'd argue he's intentionally grooming her, especially because he doesn't wait to creep on her in an episode like Airport 07, which has her at 17 years old. He tries to put his foot in her mouth. I don't know how to further elaborate on this, but yeah, he did it for creepy reasons, and I'm really glad Meg woke up before anything could happen. Other episodes support him grooming her too, like Friends Without Benefits and A Fistful of Meg. Friends Without Benefits is really just him supporting her using date rape drugs, which totally isn't concerning at all, but A Fistful of Meg is much grosser. He outright calls her ugly, which makes it seem even stranger that he wanted to sleep with her in the past, but he also wants her to drink a certain something. Think it can't get worse? On top of that, he even gives her sexual advice.
All right, Meg, remember what I taught you.
Relax my throat and make eye contact?
No, the fighting stuff.
Now, in both of these episodes, she's 18 instead of 17, but the episode in which she turns 18 is the worst of them all. It's quite literally called Quagmire and Meg. You just know this is going to be bad. Quagmire starts getting extremely close to Meg and actually starts dating her. He has this very strong urge to have sex with her and is seemingly in a committed relationship with her. He has nice moments with her. Nice as in it's innocent, not as in I like these moments, but you know exactly why he's acting this way. Yes, he acts flirtatious with her, but it is very clear that he is only acting like this for sex. So it's clear that he can be monogamous. And I think his interest in Meg is confusing for a reason. I think he's actually engaging with Meg because he cannot be with Lois, similar to what I suspect may be going on with Brian. If she's just a replacement for Lois, it doesn't matter if he's actually attracted to her, even though he does get grossed out by some woman and doesn't sleep with them. We know that he's been interested in Lois's sister for a similar reason.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Lois's recently divorced sister.
So I don't think it's out of the question for Meg to be someone that replaces Lois. To further elaborate on the Brian part though, it probably comes down to looks or just the fact that she's the next best thing. I can't outright prove that this is why Brian and Quagmire have been with her, but I do think they are both the types of people to never be with Meg. The weird inconsistencies with Quagmire being with Meg when she wasn't and was legal, Brian only implying attraction when he's drunk, both times being when she was underage, I could believe it's them intentionally acting out of character only due to their attraction towards Lois. And yeah, we know Quagmire is attracted to Lois.
Nothing. Lois, how expected.
Is this a bad time?
It's never a bad time when you're with a Q-man.
He doesn't even treat me like a woman anymore.
I know where this is going, Lois, and I'm already semi there. Oh, don't worry, Lois. I'd do everything to you.
What?
I'd do anything for you. Yeah. That was strangely arousing. A couple of teeth and some toenail clippings, and we'll be ready for our date. Hey, Lois. Hubba, hubba. Whoa. Well, hello, Lois. Forgive me for pointing. Would you just sit down and go to the bathroom already?
Why were you going through my garbage?
Well, when I stopped over earlier, I noticed Lois clipping her toenails, and I thought, oh, man, I gotta get in on that.
Great people here. Why don't you mingle?
Oh my God, Lois, you single now? Man, I haven't dug through these cans since Lois died. Can't believe it's been 12 months since I've deliberately choked myself by stuffing her discarded makeup sponges down my throat.
I was hoping that while I was gone, you could look in on Susie and Joe.
And go have sex with Quagmire.
Quagmire!
Oh, shucks, you can't blame a guy for trying.
But does he love her? It's complicated. The first time we see evidence for him maybe loving her is in Stuck Together, Torn Apart. Once he hears that she and Peter are on a break and are trying to date other people, he asks her out. Kinda strange considering he's never been one to let marriage stop him from sleeping with people, and he expected Lois to sleep with him a while back. During their date, though, it's obvious what his intentions are. He doesn't get to know her or even act that kindly, even if he doesn't use a roofie colada on her. Once he sees Peter in the restaurant and thinks Peter caught them, he keeps acting lustfully. Once it's clear that their date is over, he doesn't even care that she's gone and goes on to hit on Jennifer Love Hewitt. So, was this date only for sex? It's hard to say. If it was, why even try and date her? Quagmire isn't exactly a date kind of person, except for the times I mentioned earlier. Something could be going on here similar to Brian, where he doesn't want to betray his friend, but also can't help but love his wife. Meet the Quagmires, however, shows that he kinda is willing to betray his friend. Sure, Lois and Peter are no longer together in this universe, but to go after her immediately after she and Peter break up? It's unclear if they knew each other in this universe, but still kinda strange. What's also interesting about this episode is that Lois and Quagmire get married.
Yeah.
Their marriage is pretty much perfect, especially because it exists in the best timeline. Quagmire is still himself, unlike his complete personality change with Joan, and Lois also seems to be herself for the most part. Hell, even the kids remain basically the same. The key difference, though, is that Quagmire is monogamous. At least, I'm assuming he isn't cheating on Lois. He's actually his best self with Lois without doing a complete 180. This implies wanting more than sex from her, right? I could see his original intention at the dance being solely motivated by sleeping with her, but this suggests that he actually wants to be with her. She could be his one true love. But I'm still apprehensive about declaring that he loves her. This was in an alternate universe that never existed, and Big Man on Hippocampus also suggests that he doesn't love her.
God, I feel like I'm picking petals off a flower. He loves her not.
Anyway, in this episode, he also gets the chance to date her once Peter loses his memory and splits up with Lois. Again, he's only pursuing her once Peter is out of the way. He actually manages to get her to come up to his room after they share a candlelit dinner, which is moving fast if I've ever seen it. Right before they start doing anything, though, Lois says something that ruins everything.
It's at least nice to know I'm in the arms of a trusted friend.
You trust me? Uh-oh.
What, is something wrong?
I don't know. I'll be right back.
So, just to clarify, once Lois says that she trusts him, he is no longer interested in her. That, to me, sounds like he doesn't love her, because if you love someone, you should trust them, and they should trust you in turn. Quagmire should know this because he's been in love with Cheryl Tiegs and has been in other romantic relationships. Am I crazy for thinking that this implies he doesn't love her? This episode suggests that he literally only wants to sleep with her, and when he can't, he isn't interested in being with her.
But hey, are you ready for another petal to be picked? Because I think we all know what Quagmire says in Hot Pocket Dial.
No, I don't want a woman like Lois. I want Lois. She's perfect. I've loved her for years. She's warm and kind and beautiful. I've never been so in love with anyone.
What?
First of all, I'm not sure Modern Family Guy Lois can be described as warm and kind. Maybe that's just me, though. I actually like her the most in later seasons for the complete opposite reason. She's insane and blunt. It's fantastic. Second of all, you've never been in love with anyone like you are with Lois? That's just outright untrue. Cheryl Tiegs is always described as the one that got away and someone who was stolen away from him. We're supposed to believe that he's more in love with Lois? I don't buy it. Lois hasn't even been kind to Quagmire in the past. When she caught him spying on her, she wanted him evicted from the neighborhood. When he tried to sleep with Meg, she told him off for doing something like that. This is the person you love? The person we've barely seen you interact with? The person who criticizes you? Peter learns about Quagmire's feelings because Quagmire accidentally called him and left his confession as a voicemail. Peter doesn't appreciate this and confronts Quagmire about it in front of everyone. Quagmire cannot handle this, and since he can't avoid Lois due to being neighbors with her, he just completely moves. Lois tells him at the end, though, that everyone should just repress what they think and feel, and so they do just that. Remember me bringing up her thinking something without actually going through with it? Well, this is essentially revealed to be what she lives by.
And the truth is, we all have private thoughts we don't act on. And that's okay.
He knows that she knows, and basically everyone now knows his feelings, but everyone acts like they don't know anything. So this is the definitive answer, right? He loves Lois. I mean, he outright said it.
Okay, you guys are gonna hate me for this, but...
In Island Adventure, he recruits Lois to help him figure out how to pick up middle-aged women. Cause, you know, she's a middle-aged woman. She gives him advice for one specific woman, but Quagmire, being Quagmire, doesn't give a damn about that woman. He just wanted to know how to talk to all middle-aged women. Quagmire doesn't do anything in this episode to imply attraction for Lois, other than use one of her techniques on her, but it's clear that he only said that so she'd get off his case. The most recent episode of theirs is the Lois Quagmire, which, in my opinion, suggests that he doesn't love her. In it, he and Lois act like they're husband and wife at Lois's high school reunion. The audience thinks that he's going to try something with her, especially because they're in a honeymoon suite together, but nope. She didn't want him to make a move, and he actually didn't. I can't believe it. He brings up how he doesn't want to betray Peter and even says he's not a one-gal guy. Like, that speaks for itself, right? Even if Lois wants a husband like Quagmire, he cannot be with her because that's just who he is. To make her feel more desirable, he hits on her, which maybe could be read as him acting on his love for her, but I just think it's him being kind. Quagmire is so kind. Real quick, to cover all my bases, I have to bring up one more episode I completely forgot about in terms of Quagmire.
What is she doing? It's not even sunny. Oh my God, she's putting on some kind of weird show for Joe. This is a betrayal. Peter deserves to know.
Yeah, this scene from a wife-changing experience really emphasizes how I don't buy his love for Lois. Sure, he's spying on her, but he's clearly not getting anything out of it. He instantly thinks to tell Peter, feels as though Lois is betraying Peter, and doesn't suggest that he's into this. He's instead disgusted. But I will say, even if he loved her, it could just be that he feels guilty that Lois is cheating. Maybe he's even upset that Lois is doing it with someone other than himself. I'm not sure. Since these two episodes are both more recent than Hot Pocket Dial, I think this switch is intentional. I mean, I can believe Quagmire knew that he's not a one-woman person, but him not taking advantage of this situation? Unheard of. I think the show is really pushing for the idea that Quagmire can't be with anyone, whether it's because Quagmire is too much of a horn dog to settle down, or because Quagmire is a flawed and miserable character. Which, hey, doesn't that last description sound familiar? Like Quagmire, Brian also seems doomed to never settle down. Of course, Family Guy resets after every episode, so why would they get with someone? But I think the in-universe reasons make sense too. Brian is narcissistic, impossible to be around, and can be real creepy occasionally, not to mention the douchey things he does from time to time. Quagmire is a sex pest who practically has no morals and is mostly just boring nowadays. In a sense, they're scarily similar, except for the fact that they hate each other. I don't want to discuss all of their beef because it's not super relevant to Lois, but it is worth pointing out that they used to be friendly towards each other. They were even on good terms when it came to Lois.
Lois just peed on something.
Hey, Brian, you picking up on that?
Yep.
But, of course, we all know what happened in Jerome is the New Black. After years of everyone in Family Guy losing their best qualities and transforming into sociopaths, Brian is the only one to be directly called out. Quagmire says a lot during this rant, but the very first thing he brings up is the fact that Brian hits on Lois, despite owing his life to Peter. Now, he knows how bad he looks compared to Brian. I mean, hell, he admits that he dates women for their bodies, but at least he's honest about it. Except he isn't honest about his attraction to Lois. You know what that makes him? A hypocrite. Just like the very dog he's calling out. He cannot take what he dishes out, and he contradicts himself constantly. He can't control himself in Quagmire and Meg? Well, Brian can't control his barking in one foot in front of the mother. And guess who's absolutely pissed off by this? Not a good enough excuse? Well, Quagmire is perfectly able to control himself in the Lois Quagmire. Brian constantly hits on Lois? Gee, Quagmire, haven't you done that too? Must have been the wind. Peter is your best friend and has done plenty for you, including agreeing to sleep with you, and you feel okay with trying to get with Lois? That's how you repay him, Quagmire. Do you hear yourself? You act creepier than Brian, for God's sake. Even though I love this speech unironically, it's comical how badly this reflects on Quagmire rather than Brian. Honestly, this rant and having 25 years of Family Guy make it super clear that Brian and Quagmire are quite literally yin and yang. As the Family Guy wiki put it, what makes Brian and Quagmire's desires towards Lois different is that, while Quagmire is only interested in sex, Brian, as shown in Play It Again Brian, believes that he is more deserving of Lois, due to Peter often neglecting his wife for other interests, and that they have more things in common. Something else to suggest that it's not just sex for Brian and it sorta is for Quagmire is a conversation the two share in Teagues for Two, when Brian gets angry at Quagmire for the skills he was taught.
These skills aren't for women you care about, you idiot. This course is in getting laid, not finding love.
So what's the point? I mean, if you never find love, then it's just meaningless sex. How will I get the woman of my dreams?
Brian is fine with sex, even if it is meaningless, but he really does want to find love and settle down. He really does want to have a relationship with Lois outside of sex, and Quagmire pretty much only has meaningless sex because he wants to and he can. That's how their relationship started off, but now I'd argue that they've flipped. I mean, hell, Brian has recently said in Lois CK,
"So if you are cheating on Peter, maybe let me get a whack at it?"
Seems exactly like how Quagmire acted, just like him not trying anything with Lois in the Lois Quagmire is how early seasons Brian would act. Even the conversation I brought up earlier between Brian and Quagmire suggests that Quagmire does have the capability to love everything about a woman, not just how she can provide sex.
You'd never fall for these tricks. That's why I keep trying to figure out how to bring you back into my life, so we can make it work.
Because Cheryl wouldn't fall for his seduction, he wants to figure out how they can still be together. He knows she's above that and seemingly respects and loves her for that. Despite the switches, I still think Brian's attraction is based on all of Lois, and Quagmire's is based pretty much entirely on sex, with maybe a bit of romantic attraction. It's hard to lump in a character into a box that covers 25 years, but I do think the way they were from the beginning is similar enough to today. It's still notable just how drastically these characters have changed when it comes to love and sex. You could even say they're the same character. Okay, I wouldn't go as far to say that, but still. What's strange though is that people seem to like Quagmire more than Brian, and I do think it's only because these character shifts happen. When you search Quagmire on TikTok, you see plenty of edits, and people in the comments section seem to suggest that they're into him. Whenever he does something kinda good in recent episodes, he is praised and is seemingly liked by a lot of people. When you search Brian on TikTok, a majority of comments are hating him. Whenever you see comments, the love for Brian is reminiscent on what he used to be, and the love for Quagmire is only him, not any specific iteration. Plenty of comments and memes across multiple platforms are hateful towards Brian and not towards Quagmire. I get it, both of them are just awful, and Brian, being a main character who has changed the most, is gonna be hated more because of that. But do these people not know anything about Quagmire? I'm not crazy, right? Quagmire is a horrible person. Just because an awful person is slightly redeemed and is taken more seriously doesn't absolve him from everything. If people know how good older seasons Brian was, they must also know about older seasons Quagmire, right? Quagmire only works because he is horrible. We are not meant to agree with him. With Brian though, since he is a main character, we kinda are meant to root for him. Not for everything he does, but we are meant to like him a little bit. I honestly think the main reason behind this difference is because the show isn't kind to Brian either. They criticize him, they laugh at him, and they make him an asshole. Quagmire can just do whatever he wants and the show doesn't care. Maybe a message about him being a sex offender every now and then, but the characters of the show don't treat Quagmire like they do Brian. And I just find that insane. Guys, you're both just awful. I do like Brian more though, probably because at least he was a good person in the past. Quagmire has always been awful, and when he did change slightly, he was still awful for being a major goddamn hypocrite. I can also imagine that their rivalry is what causes this different treatment. People can probably like both of them or hate both of them, but you're most likely going to pick a side between the two because the show pits them against each other. And I have a feeling that this relates to their love of Lois too. Brian has arguably loved Lois throughout the entire show, but has been worse to Lois than Quagmire has. But to treat Quagmire better, to say that Quagmire only wants Lois, just doesn't make sense to me. Like, no? Have you watched the show? People like shipping Lois and Quagmire and not Lois and Brian. Guys, the objectively correct answer is Peter x Quagmire, Lois x Bonnie, and Brian x Therapy. Come on, guys! Actually, a poly relationship with the four of them would be funny, I think. Even outside of the fandom, I think this rivalry is fueled by their love for Lois. I think people often bring up Quagmire hating Brian because he's a dog, but really, I think that the undertone of this rivalry is the fact that they're pining for the same woman. It was the first thing Quagmire called out after all. And hey, both of them want her and know they can't have her. Quagmire, as previously mentioned, is well aware of Brian's feelings towards Lois, but does Brian know about his? Well, he is well aware of how sexual Quagmire is, and knows Quagmire does want to bang Lois. But what's super interesting is a little detail I haven't brought up until now. Brian also heard the confession from Peter's voicemail on Hot Pocket Dial. He isn't really surprised though. Quagmire has said he wants to bang Lois 100 times after all. You'd think this is beneficial for Brian, right? He and Quagmire use anything to get a leg up on the other person, but strangely enough, Brian actually acts completely rational and gives good advice.
Delete that message and pretend you never heard it. What? Why? Because you weren't meant to hear it. If you act on this, all you'll do is wreck your friendship and cause heartache for everyone involved. What, so what am I supposed to do? Just ignore it? Yeah, ignore it.
Maybe there's still some humanity in you, dog. Yeah, it could be because Brian is also in love with Lois, and all the things Peter said could technically be applied to Brian as well.
The guy's been sitting next to me all these years acting like he's my friend when all he really wants is to be with my wife. No, I'm telling you, he's gonna try to take Lois away from me.
But I still think Brian knows that Quagmire isn't really a threat. He trusts Lois, so he knows that she wouldn't just outright leave Peter for him. I do think the way Brian dismisses all this could imply that he feels the same way Quagmire does and doesn't want Peter to be mad at him too, though, and that's why he doesn't want this to be a big deal. I would like to believe he's actually doing this for selfless reasons, though. Anyway, Brian also doesn't use other things like that to his advantage either. I mean, out of the two of them, he is the only one who has kissed, married, and slept with Lois. Yes, Quagmire did do all of those things and meet the Quagmires, but again, it's not canon to this timeline, so Brian still has the upper hand. Brian did most of these things in Peter's body, but still, I'm honestly surprised it's never brought up ever again. Like, Brian was himself when he was legally married to Lois.
Am I the only one who remembers that? I mean, is there consistency or not?
Yeah, I know. That's rich. I want to show that it's constantly inconsistent to have consistencies. But come on! Don't the writers know how important it is for the lore? Jeez. But you know who is also important to the lore that I should talk more about? The ginger MILF herself, Lois Griffin. It's kind of hard to talk about Lois in these episodes because it's obvious how she feels about these guys, so hopefully it doesn't seem like I'm completely neglecting her. I mean, are you guys surprised that a married woman doesn't exactly have much to talk about in terms of love? They're never gonna shock us and have her permanently leave Peter, so I kind of just glossed over her rejecting those two in all these episodes. It is notable that she's mostly friendly with Brian and Quagmire too, no matter the season. Yeah, she's much more willing to critique them or call them out now, but she's still cordial with them. She just views them as friends of hers. If she does view Quagmire as her own friend, it's kind of unclear if she does. I mean, she's hung out with him when she took Peter's space in the group, but other than episodes like Island Adventure, the two are rarely hanging out or even talking with each other. But as I've already pointed out, she has married both of them, even if technically she never did marry Quagmire. All I'm saying is that it's possible for her to marry him. Both of them are much kinder to Lois when trying to get with her than they typically are, even if it's clear that Quagmire wants to bang her first and foremost. So, if Peter is no longer in her life, it makes sense why she'd go for someone she considers her friend. Even though I got angry about Quagmire calling her warm and kind in his love confession, I do think both marriage episodes have Lois acting warm and kind. Well, she's supportive of her husband's, but is either matching Quagmire's freak or she's cheating on Brian. Just so we're clear, I don't fault her for not sleeping with him, because consent matters all the time, and just because you're married doesn't mean you're obligated to bang. Still, it is cheating to be with someone other than your spouse. Not sure if I'd call being a deviant or a cheater warm or kind. I think the show is trying to suggest that Brian and Quagmire are only being held back because of Peter, but I think something suggests that she wouldn't end up with them if he weren't in her life anymore. Yes, she probably rejects their confessions because she's married, but I think even if she wasn't, she really just isn't interested in them in that way. She's seen the worst of them, whether it's Quagmire spying on her, getting with Meg, or do anything he can for sex, or Brian trying to force himself on her, constantly lust after her in the comfort of her own home, or only let her cheat on Peter with him. I know Family Guy makes characters forget about each other's past deeds, but come on. These guys are awful. I think Lois doesn't even like their personalities at this point, considering how rude she can be towards them. Not like they don't deserve it, because they do, but I think her numerous callouts are enough to suggest that she is not interested. I will admit, at one point, I could see her being interested in some way, because why else would she admit to thinking about sleeping with Brian, or go on 2 dates with Quagmire? But all of that happened in the first half of the season, so they've really changed. I also don't think Peter is preventing them from getting together because he certainly hasn't stopped Lois from cheating.
Yeah, Lois has cheated a lot. Here's a montage.
No, Mother, I do not think I'd be better off married to a chimp. I don't care how well that chimp across the street is doing. Really? Well, yeah, okay. I guess you can tell him I said hi. Watch this. Mr. President, I need to have a word with you. Well, you certainly are very persuasive. Oh, Barney. Oh, I've been waiting for this for years. I want to be your pinky ring. Kiss me.
Mom, I forgot my keys. Do you know where?
Okay, just get your pants off, hon.
Stop right there.
Larry, you gotta get out of here.
It's been a great 2 months. Meg, keep painting.
He's like hypnotized. Do we wake him?
Peter, there's something you don't know. Chris might not even be your son.
What?
I once slept with Philip Seymour Hoffman. One more thing, I'm dating Bonnie now. Hello.
This is because I had an emotional affair with my trainer.
Peter, I'm the one who had an emotional affair with my trainer. You had a traumatic response and pretended it was you.
And you'll never forgive me for it, will you?
Yep, Lois is unsatisfied with her marriage, which is obvious for anyone with eyes. That begs the question on how seriously are we supposed to take these flings? I feel like it's easy to dismiss characters who are unnamed or are purely used for jokes or gags, but that still leaves 6 plot-related times Lois has cheated on Peter. Maybe I'm just biased, but I still think she loves Peter, even if it's only for a nice resolution where everything is forgiven, but clearly not enough to be acting like this, which further proves my point. Lois is not above cheating, but she is above sleeping with either Quagmire or Brian. The show might be doing this to torture these characters, but plot and characterization-wise, yeah, I don't think they deserve Lois's affections. Lois herself doesn't even resemble the character both of them loved in the past. I really wouldn't describe her as warm, kind, compassionate, or charming based on what we're seeing now. Don't get me wrong, I love modern-day Lois, but I like her because she's so much more unhinged and fun. And yeah, even in the past she was insane too, but now? You'll notice way more when she's kind rather than insane just because of how used to her antics we've gotten. Those adjectives certainly describe the Lois we've seen in the past, before she was unsatisfied with her marriage. At the start of Family Guy, we're more likely to root for their marriage to work because we are shown just how much they care about each other. Even still, I do think they were unintentionally planting the seeds that led towards what their marriage is now.
It's like flanderization of a character, except rather than any small trait being heightened, it's their worst ones.
Early seasons Peter would constantly mess up and only occasionally pull through, which also applies to recent Peter, but it's so much worse now than it was then. Interestingly enough, his faults are always pointed out in Family Guy. Someone like Lois also has her own problems, and maybe this is just me, but I feel like hers haven't been reprimanded as severely. That's kinda interesting. Characters even exist just to criticize Peter, like Carter Peterschmidt, who basically badmouths Peter whenever he's on screen. In a way, this makes sense. Even though Peter does try to be on his best behavior around Carter, he isn't exactly the type of person you'd expect a social elite to settle down with. Peter isn't a gentleman, he isn't a snob, and he's not even that good looking, in the sense that he's poorer than these elites. What he is a down-to-earth guy who jokes around and loves to have fun. And those reasons are why Lois married him, from his good traits to the fact that he isn't like any of the men she's surrounded by. Across multiple episodes, and even in Family Guy Live in Vegas, Lois brings up that she would do certain things to upset her parents. This includes modeling, rebelling to get her parents' attention, and dating men her parents didn't approve of.
With parents so agitating, my way of retaliating was one little rule of dating. Give mommy and daddy a fright. I slept with a different black guy every night.
And you know what? I'm gonna take that chance my father never let me take when I was younger. I'm gonna become a model.
Well, Lois was always a wild stallion. But don't worry, I know how to control her.
Peter, nothing's gonna happen. Don't you see? She's only doing this to get a rise out of us. If we fight her on it, she'll only push further. Peter, trust me. I know what's going on in her head. It's just a game. I used to do the same thing to my parents. The problem is they pushed back. Peter, listen, Meg's just rebelling for attention. I used to do the same thing. But what I learned about parenting from the jacket of a book I didn't buy is that when your child rebels, you can't push back or they'll double down. You just stay supportive, let them learn their own lessons, and they'll come crawling back to you in the end.
I think her being with Peter was a final screw you to them. Sure, Peter was sweeter than the other things she did to rebel, especially because their relationship was so wholesome, but he was still someone Lois knew her parents wouldn't like. He's someone who loved Lois no matter what, would do anything to get her back, and wouldn't leave her when promised $1 million. If he wanted to, he would. But what's sad is, her parents did think this would happen. We see one of Lois's dreams in prescription heroin, and she is trying to get her father to give her attention by asking him if he wants to go to her recital. Her father doesn't care, calls her extremely needy, and figures that she'll marry the first fat slob we meet. Peter then shows up in the dream, proving that Lois is deeply unsatisfied with her life. No matter what she does, she can never make her parents happy, and that's why she's become the person she is now. And we know that she resents her childhood because of what she says in Peter Schmidt Manor and in Adoptation.
Do you have any idea what that woman meant to me? While you were off working or golfing or God knows what, she was at my piano recitals or teaching me how to tie my shoes. She was the only person in that house who was really there for me, and you took her away. I just don't get it. I was raised by a nanny. I mean, Daddy didn't even learn my name until I was 8.
There's a Mr. Important on the line.
Tell him he'll have to wait.
What? Well, Daddy would always take business calls when I would play with him. Oh, of course I'm okay. Why wouldn't I be okay? I'm at the zoo. After 30 years of asking Daddy to take me to the zoo, here I am. I guess I was just jealous of all the attention you were giving Tatum and afraid that she'd taken my place as your daughter.
Pretty intense, right? I don't think life always sucked for Lois. The early season's episodes showed just how cute of a couple Peter and Lois were together, and they really did seem like they were meant for each other. Even when things got rough, the two of them would work it out.
The whole she would find him in any universe bit.
I feel like the middle seasons of Family Guy had them at their worst, but now, I think the really recent stuff is much kinder than the middle stuff, while still being edgy in its own right. Episodes like Cutaway Land, Young Parent Trap, The Manchurian Candidate, Old World Harm, Cabin Pressure, and Lois C.K. all stand out to me as challenging their relationship, but not showing them at each other's throats. They actually get along and have decent moments here, especially when compared to the violence of past episodes. Now, characters care so much more about each other, especially towards Meg, though they still make fun of her. Even though it's almost always unearned, the person in the wrong apologizes, or those affected by that person apologize, and everything is neatly resolved. This isn't new, this happened in older seasons too, and they even joke about that sort of ending in Lois C.K.
Holy crap, we only got 8 seconds left in tonight's episode. You don't have to be smart for me or serious. I married you for who you are, a good husband, blah, 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 blah.
And I married you because you did mouth stuff in the car at one time, but overall that's not really who you are.
It's kind of like they're meeting a quota in each episode now, and can't just end it when things are at their worst. Because of that, I guess Peter and Lois have a much healthier marriage. They've certainly changed over time. We see that Peter is kind of meeker in these recent episodes, especially in Cool Hand Lois when he just doesn't tell Lois that she can't cheat on him. There have also been plenty of jokes emasculating Peter, or calling him a beta or a cuck as of late. And really, I think the only consistent thing about Lois throughout the entire series is how wild and free she can be, especially because of how often she cheats on him. She seems super mature and relaxed, which she sort of is in a sense, but she can raise hell if she wants. She can even get aggressive when she's jealous of Peter. Both of them can easily get jealous whenever someone talks to the other person.
I guess that kind of ruins all the times Lois cheats on Peter, because if she can't stand Peter being with anyone else, why can she be with anyone else? But whatever.
Here's the thing though, I think she only cheats because she wants the affection she's missing out on while still looking happily married to Peter. Since we're also shown that Lois, being in an unhappy place in her life, is super bored, that could be another reason why she wants to spice up her life and be with someone else. Even without cheating on someone, she still wants attention, like we saw with Jo in A Wife-Changing Experience.
So what if I was putting on a show? At least someone was in the audience. And maybe ask yourself why I'd even feel I have to do that.
She may frame it in a way so that she looks like a good person, but it's obvious that these attempts at getting attention are for selfish reasons.
Well, sue me for trying to help reignite the passion in another couple's marriage. I can't seem to do it in my own.
That's not what you're doing. You're flaunting yourself in front of the whole neighborhood just to boost your own ego.
Because her wanting attention isn't always tied to cheating, I do think that's probably another reason why Lois can't be with Quagmire or Brian, because she doesn't need a husband or a boyfriend outside of Peter. She just needs something temporary and simple. If they both truly love her, it cannot work. We know that she just wants to feel appreciated, and that's what always leads to her cheating. It's probably why she appreciates the affections of Brian and Quagmire, even if she doesn't reciprocate their feelings, because they're constantly telling her that she still got it, that she is still desirable even if Peter doesn't seem to desire her. She likes hearing Brian write a poem that she clearly knows is about her, and she appreciates Quagmire going on dates with her. She even hates how Quagmire doesn't hit on her, because it makes her look like she's past her prime.
That's what Lois wants. Not in a relationship, but reassurance.
Again, she has openly admitted that repression is what causes happiness.
The secret to happiness is burying all your true feelings and living a life of bland compromise.
She will live in compromise with Peter, pretend that she's fine, but still needs something to keep this up. Actual attention. Based on her rough childhood, her always wanting attention and her doing a variety of things to get said attention is all she cares about. She desperately cares how people view her. Even outside of wanting attention, I think it's something Lois picked up from her parents. Carter can be relatively nice, using nicknames like Pumpkin for Lois, or by not being a horrible person towards his grandkids, actually, but it's all a performance. He isn't willing to actually do the things fathers do. He isn't willing to be there because he cares about money first and foremost. I think that when he does help out, it's only because it would reflect poorly on his status. He does seem to love Lois, but he certainly isn't always there for her. He wasn't even there for her during her childhood, something he acknowledges.
I was never there, and it's the biggest regret of my life. I'd give anything to go back and have a second chance to be a better father to you.
These criticisms he's thrown at her and her sister, him locking up his son in a mental institution and covering it up, it's his true persona. He cheats, makes fun of his wife and daughter, and will prioritize money. Anyone can be useful to him if money is on the line, including Peter. Babs also performs, hiding her identity and also relying on money, so this sort of behavior isn't uniquely Carter's, but we don't really see Babs acting like Carter. She's a different type of neglectful and jealous. Lois isn't this evil, and I say that because of her stance on money. But I do think performing is something she picked up, and it's why she loves attention so much. This sort of thing also explains other things she does, like say nice things openly but quietly smack-talk other people, or how she wears makeup because she's worried about how people like Peter view her. Even her piano playing is relevant. She wanted her parents to go to her recitals, and they didn't. She wants to win a piano competition later on in life because she hates losing to Alexis Radcliffe. Lois doesn't like it when she doesn't have a purpose, when she doesn't have anything to do, because it's a reminder of her past and how, realistically, she hasn't done much with her life. All she has are quick flings and small gestures for attention. She doesn't really have anything going on outside of that. She doesn't even play the piano or teach piano lessons anymore. Probably because, like the show's shift suggests, Lois has pretty much given up. She still does things for people to notice her, good or bad, but the bad stuff is only done to make other people think about her. She seemingly wants positive attention the most, but she's also known to do bad things too, just for any sort of reaction. Even though she would cheat pretty regularly on Peter, nothing too extreme or passionate has happened recently when she cheats. The most recent example of Bonnie is sort of proof of that. She and Lois have a very simple life together and don't really have sex. I mean, they do, but you know what I mean, it's not based on sex. This cheating, other than reassurance, could also just be escapism and a change of pace. Rather than craving sex, she just craves something new. Yes, she wants Quagmire to hit on her and she shows off her body to Joe, but it's never with the intention of actually sleeping with them. Like I said earlier, the recent seasons have been more kind while also still retaining its edginess, so perhaps she views herself as a good person with excellent relationships with everyone, whereas everyone else sees their relationship more realistically. If what Bonnie pointed out about Lois's behavior is how everyone else feels, I definitely think Lois thinks everyone is so much closer to her than they really are, if she can't recognize how she's behaved towards Bonnie. Which I guess makes me question how she looks at Quagmire and Brian. For the most part, I'd say that the three of them are friendly with one another. Quagmire and Brian shift to hating each other, but the relationships between any combination of the three seem stagnant. Towards the beginning, Lois saw both Brian and Quagmire as relatively good people. They were friendly, and she either was clueless to how they felt about her, whether that was love or desire to sleep with her, or she knew everything the whole time. I think it's a bit of both. If Lois was able to recognize Brian's feelings in Brian in love, I'm sure she is constantly aware of his remaining affections towards her. Since she refers to him wanting to have sex with her in Deep Throats, and can very clearly tell when his poem is about her and Play It Again, Brian, I think she has always known. And that might be a reason behind her marrying him, to make him happy since he's made her happy. Quagmire, I think, is a little more complicated. Like I brought up previously, she has noticed how much of a scumbag he can be, but I don't think it ever sticks. We know that nothing up until Blind Ambition has clued into Lois that Quagmire wants to sleep with her, especially because she describes Quagmire as being the exact opposite of what he really is and stuck together torn apart.
I guess it's better to go out with you than some sex pervert. I'm in!
Blind Ambition kind of redeems Quagmire in a messed up way though, so I could maybe see her believing that he's no longer the same Quagmire that spied on her in the bathroom. I would argue that she knows what he really is in the back of her head though, especially because she's unfazed by Peter describing how Quagmire is motivated by sex in Quagmire and Meg, and knows full well what he's trying to do when he and Meg go up to his cabin.
Everyone knows if you go away with a guy for the weekend and don't have sex with him, you're a huge bitch. We gotta stop them!
She should hate him, right? He tried to sleep with her daughter. But no, she actually still acts normally around him. Her advice on how he should repress his feelings isn't the best, but maybe it's because she knows how dangerous he can be. I don't think she had any idea of him potentially loving her though, because him loving her is only brought up once, and she seems shocked to hear that he feels that way. I feel like after Hot Pocket Dial, though, she isn't even hiding that Quagmire is a creep. Since the nature of her relationships constantly fluctuate, I think it's possible that she can both hate Brian and Quagmire for being scumbags, but also tolerate them when they aren't aggressively infatuated with her. Brian and Lois are still friendly towards each other, and she even trusts Brian with information that she doesn't tell anyone else. Recent examples of this are when she told Brian about her high school reunion, and when she started to do stand-up comedy. Brian has proven himself to be pretty good at keeping quiet, unless he is keeping quiet from Lois, because he either won't bother or will be forced to tell her. So I'm not surprised that Lois trusts him. If he's able to keep quiet about her erotic fanfiction other than telling Stewie, who isn't understood by most people, and is able to keep quiet about Quagmire's confession, I really think it is a personality trait of his to mind his business, or at least keep information that benefits him to himself. Quagmire and Lois aren't exactly friends though, so I think it's easier for her to just forgive Quagmire. She has hung out with him when Peter isn't around, and she did hang out with him to help give relationship advice, but the former wasn't a deep friendship, and it ended pretty quickly, while the latter had Quagmire do something that Lois was against, which caused her to be angry with him. Their relationship seems to just be a basic acknowledgement of each other that has Quagmire interested in her, and Lois pretty much indifferent towards him. While I acknowledge that the animosity between Brian and Quagmire could be motivated by their feelings towards Lois, I don't know if the show has really recognized this. They have shown that their hatred can come from love, since Quagmire gets pissed at Brian being involved with Cheryl Tiegs in one way or another, and Brian gets mad when Quagmire dates Jillian. But when it comes to Lois, she's not really brought up. The only way their hatred impacts Lois is when Brian is concerned with Lois being around Quagmire. And really, Lois is never an issue for the two of them in terms of scoring. Even though both of them want to be with Lois, they have never seemed super affected when the other person is involved. Quagmire may say that Brian is horrible for constantly hitting on Lois, but he never brings it up again and doesn't bring this issue up with anyone else. Brian may have been worried when Lois was getting close to Quagmire, but it was never because he wanted to be with Lois instead. Even when he finds out Quagmire has feelings for her, he doesn't tell anyone else and doesn't see it as a huge deal. Both of them seem to understand that even if the other one gets close to Lois, nothing will happen. And when Brian was able to get so close to Lois, it was only because he wasn't himself. I guess this makes me question, is Lois their true love? And hey, does Lois love any of them back? Both Brian and Quagmire declare at some point that Lois is their one true love. They don't use those exact words, but it's very clear that Lois is stated to be the only person they want.
Not to be extremely skeptical, but are you sure about that?
I think Quagmire's is the most surprising, which I brought up earlier. Number one, I don't know if Quagmire is really a monogamous guy. It's possible, and yes, we see him obsessed kind of solely on Lois, but I still don't buy it. I'm willing to accept that he wants to be monogamous, but his sex addiction has ruined that for him. But since the most recent episodes of Family Guy have joked towards him being a pest than someone who can settle down, I lean more towards him not wanting to settle down. He just doesn't want to be with one person, but definitely not in a romantic way. All of his marriages have been portrayed as bad, even as one with Lois in the best possible universe, since we the audience are supposed to root for Peter to fix this and get back with her. For him to have true love and settle down, I think serious positive changes would need to happen in his life. Number two, Lois doesn't really seem like someone he can love. The depth of his love is only described as wanting her and having wanted her for years. We don't really explore how he knows her, what led to this attraction towards her, or even any acknowledgement on whether he also wants her romantically. Based on Peter's reaction in Hot Pocket Dial, we can infer that Quagmire most likely wants to be romantic and sexual with Lois.
But, and maybe this is my bias, I don't see it.
I don't think Quagmire loves Lois. I think he wants her, sure, but I think it is because he can't have her. She's the forbidden fruit because of her marriage to Peter. Now, I know what you're thinking. Doesn't Quagmire go after married women all the time? After all, he has successfully slept with Cleveland and Joe's wives, and marriage never stopped him. He also never admitted to loving them, so what makes Lois any different? I think it's because of her personality. She does seem to love Peter, even if their relationship is strange, but Loretta and Bonnie have shown more disdain towards their husbands. I also think it could be her noticing how creepy Quagmire is to have her never consider cheating on Peter with Quagmire. I think Lois is a challenge to Quagmire, and I really don't think he can love her when he barely knows her.
I might lose some of you here, but has anyone here watched American Dad? Don't go off on the video, I'm still gonna talk about family.
One of the many episodes I watched has an interesting conversation that I find relevant here. In Love AD style, in which Roger develops a crush on Haley and becomes obsessed with her, this conversation happens.
But I love her too!
No, you don't! You're obsessed with me! There's a difference!
What?
Roger, love is mutual, and that's what Jeff and I have.
Quagmire is obsessed with Lois rather than loving her. What indicates any sort of love he feels towards her? While he tries to date her and did confess loving her, I'd argue that the dating was only so he could sleep with her, and his confession of love was just what he thought was love, but was rather an obsession. The only problem with this is that if he is obsessed with her and doesn't truly love her, what's stopping him from trying something on her? I think it's because he thinks he's in love with her. His obsession with her isn't like anything he's felt with any other woman, and that's what's stopping him. This love he has towards her is shallow, and how can it not be? If someone makes the argument for Lois being his one true love, you'd have to admit that Cheryl Tiegs is also someone he loved. He has pictures of her around his house, which he also had of Lois. He makes comments implying he wants to sleep with her, and hates anyone who gets with her. The key difference between Lois and Cheryl is that Quagmire was actually in a relationship with her, and that Quagmire does not hate Peter at all for being with Lois. The whole reason why Cheryl broke up with him was because of jealousy, so to have Quagmire not act incredibly jealous towards Peter makes me think that yeah, he doesn't love Lois. That's why I think if he really has one true love, it's Cheryl.
But you want to know something crazy? I think I can go a step further and really prove that Cheryl would be the one for Quagmire, even if what happened in Meet the Quagmires happened.
Something that is hard to calculate for Family Guy is characters' ages, especially because it's been on for so long and the timeline therefore has to shift. Something that I occasionally have to consider when writing this is just how serious I can take certain aspects of the show. For example, if Meg's full name is Megatron or not. I don't really like accepting this as canon because Megatron was only in one joke and people have still called Meg Megan.
All right, what's going on back here? Oh, hello, Megan.
Everyone, please welcome Megan Griffin.
I thought you didn't want to be in the pageant.
Oh, Megan. Courtney, this is Megan.
So it doesn't seem like we're supposed to take it seriously. The only objection to this that I can think of is the future version of Meg who transitioned to be called Ron. Even though the episode suggests that she got this name from someone else, I do think it's fun that Megatron features Meg and Ron, so it's possible that he calls himself that in the future for that reason. The joke that has Quagmire mention he's 61 is one of those weird jokes for me. It pretty much ruins any continuity Family Guy has ever had, and it's not really brought up again in the show. So, is he really 61? If not, how old is he? I'd like to assume that he's around Peter's age, who is around 45, but is there any basis in this? The first piece of evidence I can think of that goes against him being 61 is from the episode Underage Peter. When Peter gets in trouble while intoxicated, Mayor West raises the drinking age to 50. This shouldn't be a problem for the guys though, right? Quagmire can simply buy drinks for everyone because he's 61. But nope, they have to rely on Brian, who's older than 50 in human years, to buy them drinks.
Strike one.
Another obvious piece of evidence is Ida Davis herself. She would look so much older if her son was actually 61 years old, but what's even better is that in Trans Fat, she said that she had her sex change at that exact age. Because fluid timeline, I think Ida is most likely still around 61 years old since she only transitioned recently.
Strike two.
Lastly, Quagmire says that he had a relationship with Tracy Bellings in high school, which took place in 1986. This would mean in 2013, when this episode came out, he would be around 43 years old, if this episode is to be believed.
Strike three, baby, you're out.
What's funnier is that all three of these episodes aired after Quagmire said he was 61. Anyway, 43 is pretty close to the age Peter is around that time. Guess I was right. But like I said earlier, this example is from one episode with one small scene, so how can I treat this as canon? Well, other inconsistencies with Quagmire come up with none other than Cheryl Tiegs. Strap in, everyone. Things are going to get complicated.
I'm going to still rely on this faulty logic a little bit more, so please forgive me.
If we are to believe that Peter and Quagmire are about the same age, then in Meet the Quagmires, Peter, Lois, and Quagmire are all 18. Lois and Peter being the same age is another inconsistency in itself, but whatever, we know that these characters are around the same age. Since that episode showed the year as 1984, this would mean that the three of them would have been born in either 1965 or 1966. This is a little messy because Quagmire had to have been in high school in 1986 for this whole reasoning to work, but since the show itself changes what year scenes happen during, I think a 2-year inconsistency is barely anything. Something smaller to support that Quagmire would be around Peter's age would also be the fact that he's in the Navy. Peter and Quagmire meet when Quagmire is in the Navy, as shown by the episode Death Lives. And since Peter was dating Lois ever since he was 18, it's likely that when he met Carter, he would still be around 18. Especially because Lois and Peter look the same as they did in the flashback of Peter Caviar Eater and Meet the Quagmires. To serve in the Navy, you have to be at least 17 years old. And since those sorts of things recruit people when they're young, I'd like to think Quagmire would be pretty young when Peter meets him. We know that Quagmire and Cheryl met after he was discharged from the Navy, which could be any time around 1984. So using the logic that Quagmire was born in 1965 or 1966 and Cheryl was born in 1947, this would mean at the youngest they met when he was 18 and she was 37.
Way to rob the cradle, Cheryl.
The only evidence that this would be around 1984 is quite literally from a joke about actor John Davidson. He refers to himself as the host of That's Incredible, which aired from 1980 to 1984. It would make sense for him to refer to himself as the host after the show was cancelled, if this was 1984, especially because the show was syndicated and this was the most famous thing he was known for at the time. Because he hosted Hollywood Squares in 1986, I think he would probably refer to himself as that host during that time, so this suggests that Quagmire had to be of Cheryl Tiegs between 1984 and 1986.
Yes, I'm seriously using a real-life guy's brief appearance in a flashback to help prove the timeline works.
The scene actually is meant to be taken seriously because this is the only time Quagmire talks about his relationship with Cheryl in depth. It's not like he randomly joked about John Davidson appearing, but even if we remove John Davidson from the equation, the 1984 to 1986 time span fits in pretty nicely with what Quagmire said about the 80s. Because he said, if this is the kind of joy the 80s have in store for me, I'm ready, this implies that this is the early 80s rather than the late 80s. And yeah, it could mean that this was literally 1980, but I still think it would make sense for him to say this anytime in the early 80s. I can't prove it didn't happen between 1980 to 1983, but because this all had to happen after Quagmire was discharged from the Navy, and because it would be gross for Cheryl to date someone underage, I think this had to have happened in 1984. Nothing suggests Quagmire's in the Navy and Meet the Quagmires, but I think because Peter asked to marry Lois in both Death Lives and Meet the Quagmires, and since we know Peter was dating Lois the whole time he was 18, it would make sense for the events of Death Lives and Meet the Quagmires to both have happened in 1984. At the very least, we know that Death Lives happens before the flashback in Tiegs for Two. Just to really clear things up, it's most likely that Death Lives takes place before Meet the Quagmires because while Peter did ask to marry Lois to Carter, he never proposed to her in that episode, even if she heard that he wanted to be with her. He does, however, propose to her in Meet the Quagmires, so it makes sense that it would happen after Death Lives. I would argue, though, that perhaps he met Carter in Death Lives because he proposed to her. If this is true, it would mean definitively that Quagmire had to be in the Navy and Meet the Quagmires. Because Peter officially meets Quagmire in Death Lives, though, and obviously knows him in Meet the Quagmires, I think Death Lives had to have come first. Because time travel is complicated in Family Guy, which actually might be fun to talk about in a future video, it's unclear if the timeline always had to be Peter stopping Quagmire from kissing Lois at the dance, because it suggested that originally, Quagmire never danced with Lois and that Peter went on his date with Lois. The original timeline could have had Peter not knowing about Quagmire at all, and then he meets Carter, which causes him to meet Quagmire. It's especially more confusing because Death Lives aired before Meet the Quagmires, so it could be that the original timeline had those events happen, and then the time travel shenanigans complicate things even further.
You know what? This is a great time for me to reflect on everything I've done with my life. And it's also a great moment to think about how this is where I am in my life. Making this, talking about Family Guy.
Regretting how I decided to start watching it seriously in 2019 and never recovering from that. Why did 14-year-old me decide to get addicted? I hate her so much. Look what you've done to me. You have doomed me for life. Two possibilities now exist using this logic. Logic I only accept because multiple jokes and lines favor Quagmire being around the same age as Lois and Peter, even if that's not good enough. One possibility determines that Quagmire had to have been in the Navy during Meet the Quagmires, and also doubles as suggesting Lois never was before Cheryl Tiegs. We know that Quagmire could have easily still been with Tiegs in this timeline, by the way, because he mentions her often before Meet the Quagmires, which would have changed the timeline. The other one is pretty much canon, I'd argue. That being Death Lives comes before Meet the Quagmires, because Quagmire has said he loves Lois, even if I don't believe him, and because Peter and Brian know what happened during Meet the Quagmires, they shifted the timeline so that Quagmire had to have danced with Lois at the dance. Which leaves us back at square one, right? I can't prove that Cheryl came after Lois because I don't know exactly when Quagmire was in the Navy. The only thing I have left is logic based on this paper thin timeline I've constructed for myself. If the Tiegs for Two flashback happened first, why would Quagmire even fall in love with Lois? Seriously. All we get to maybe suggest love is Quagmire saying that he's a friend and him trying to kiss her. In Meet the Quagmires, we never hear that Quagmire loves Lois or even fell in love with her at the dance, so I don't think it's good enough to suggest love. Why would dating someone who you considered to be the one before Lois, who you barely had a relationship with, now mean that Lois is your one true love? If the Teagues for Two flashback happened after, then it's very obvious that a relationship like that would be more significant than just a dance at the country club dance. I still think that it makes the most sense for the timeline to be Death Lives, then Meet the Quagmires, then Teagues for Two, the timeline for how the episodes themselves aired. But either way, I just don't buy Lois still being more important than Cheryl. And I guess, even with all this in mind, I don't think Cheryl is all that important to Quagmire either. She certainly was in past episodes, but now she's not really brought up. Quagmire doesn't seem interested in settling down with anyone anymore. The middle seasons of Family Guy seem to make Quagmire more normal. They sort of wanted us to feel bad for him. But I think they've just gone right back to their roots. He's not really a one-woman guy anymore, and for him to be that way, either with Cheryl or Lois, involves major timeline shifts or him being the person he was before. His sex addiction wasn't holding him back with either of his relationships with them, but since this is now a major part of his life, he probably realizes that he really can't be with them. I will admit that my argument is faulty, because everything about Quagmire's character is faulty. To bring up Family Guy live in Vegas once more, he is stated as being someone who is selfish and doesn't love anyone.
Cause the Q-Man loves nobody. You really love nobody. And boy, I mean nobody. And boy, you mean nobody. But my own sweet flippin' self.
This is the characterization I lean towards rather than Quagmire actually loving anyone, because we've seen that part of him during the show's entire runtime. I will admit, though, that him not pursuing Lois could be because he actually loves her. If you love someone, you let them go. I can accept that Quagmire understands that he is a flawed man, and that is why he doesn't go after Lois. But I just don't agree with that idea. Why would he love Lois? He hasn't actually been with her, and I think outside of interpretations, we cannot confirm he wants nothing more than sex from her. I think the inconsistencies with his control tell me that he doesn't even want sex from her. He's Quagmire. If he wanted to, he would've. I don't think he's becoming a better person because he's still doing various scummy things, so nothing is holding him back from being with Lois. Of course, it's hard for me to buy that Cheryl would actually be someone he loves for the same reason, but if he really is capable of loving someone, I think he would love Cheryl. Again, what is stopping him from being with Lois? Peter isn't a problem because he hasn't been a problem for Quagmire in the past. He seems to root for their relationship, or at least doesn't want any betrayal happening, and their relationship and them acting like a couple around each other just doesn't seem to affect him.
Well, it hasn't affected him like it has Brian.
I could make a lot of arguments towards Lois being Brian's one true love. First of all, she's the first person we see him infatuated with, dog or human. He doesn't just want to sleep with her like Quagmire does, he actually wants to be in a relationship with her. He's attracted to her sexually, but it's clearly not the only reason why he's into her. The two of them also have a well-established friendship that persists through all of Family Guy. Rather than Quagmire just barely knowing her, Brian really knows a lot about her and her him. She is consistently talked about in a sexual way by him, but he also stands up for Lois, reassures her about certain things, and can communicate efficiently with her. Again, the two of them don't really need to lecture each other like they do Peter because both of them are fairly rational and human. They have lectured each other, but it is in situations where the other person knows for a fact what they are thinking, feeling, or doing is wrong. Brian gets upset with her when she prioritizes looks over personality. She gets mad when he tries to force himself on her. And in these cases and others like them, both acknowledge that yes, they are in the wrong. I know that because I brought up that American Dad quote though, that people are wondering if this is love. Here's what I'll say. Both of them love each other. Platonically, of course, but it is still a love for one another. People oftentimes say that they married their best friend, and I would consider Lois and Brian to be somewhat best friends. It's not explicitly said in the show, especially because Lois hangs out more with Bonnie and Donna, and Brian with Stewie or Peter, but they do clearly talk to each other and trust one another. And hey, Brian and Lois were married at one point. But yes, it's hard to claim if he truly loves her romantically using the logic I used to dismiss Quagmire. I think that the actions he has done are despicable, and you really wouldn't do those things if you truly love someone. But I do think the show is pushing for the narrative that he loves her. All of her. It may not be love, but it is a loving feeling. I think compared to Quagmire, you are meant to focus on Brian's good moments rather than his awful ones. Play It Again Brian is the most damning because it genuinely wants Brian to get with Lois. Other clips, ones in which Brian actually gets called out and faces consequences, are not scenes we are meant to side with Brian on. Because Quagmire is never intended to be rooted for in these cases, based on writing and visual gags, I don't think the show is trying to push for Quagmire loving her. I'll come back to this idea once I cover Lois though. I could also see Brian having other true loves outside of Lois based on what we've seen. Because he can't be with Lois on account of her being married, he dates plenty of other women. Since he is much more of a main character compared to Quagmire, we see more of what these relationships he has are like. If I had to argue anyone else being Brian's true love, I would probably say either Pearl, Seabreeze, or Ida. Pearl and Brian had a great relationship, and it's kind of ambiguous if Pearl loved Brian back, but she didn't seem to mind Brian flirting with her and enjoyed spending time with him before she died. I feel like had she not been killed, she and Brian probably would have had a romantic relationship with each other. And before anyone claims that he didn't love her, I would bring up how the whole premise of the episode is the types of people Brian dates, how lonely he is, and how Pearl is more than just her appearance. For Seabreeze, I think their relationship is only lustful, especially because he's sexually frustrated at the moment. But he does seem to care about her and wants to take responsibility for impregnating her. Once it's revealed that the puppies she had weren't his, though, he's no longer there for her. So yeah, probably not someone he loves. Now, Ida is truly the strongest contender for who Brian's true love could be, and it's also the funniest answer because of what it means for Quagmire. Ida might appear to be a one-night stand, but Brian describes Ida to the Griffins like this.
I met an amazing woman. Finally, the whole package. She's a classy, smart, beautiful lady. You're just jealous because I found a real woman.
He does lose interest once he finds out that she is Quagmire's parent, and that, most notably, she's transgender, which, yeah, that doesn't end well. But the two of them actually rekindle their relationship. They meet at a hotel, again, and sleep with each other. This probably doesn't sound any different from the first example, other than the fact that they continue to date each other. Yeah, he was afraid to be out in the open with her, because she is trans, but he still decides to actually be out with her in public, so that's something, I guess. Because this means that Quagmire knows about the two of them being together, he does not take it well, which results in Ida choosing him over Brian. And Brian, surprisingly, is sad because of this. Even though Ida's existence is played for laughs, and even though Brian doesn't seem to fully like dating someone who is trans, I do think he cares about her and may even love her. Unlike the other examples, she doesn't die, she doesn't cheat on Brian, and she doesn't leave after just one episode. In all honesty, I could see the two of them actually getting back together in a future episode. And for those reasons, I could see Ida being the one for Brian. That's pretty much the only love that I would argue comes close to how he feels towards Lois. But I still feel like I can't confirm that Lois is his one true love. Like Quagmire, Peter isn't really stopping him from pursuing Lois, most likely because he was unaware how Brian felt. But Peter being with Lois doesn't seem like a problem for either of them. Brian oftentimes can act like a wingman for Peter, telling him what to do for the relationship to work out, and even works towards Peter ending up with Lois. I constantly mentioned Meet the Quagmires earlier, so to bring it up once more, Brian admits that Peter not marrying Lois is genuinely the best outcome for the world, tells Peter he can't marry her, but then helps get Peter back together with her. Time travel could factor into this, especially because the kids start disappearing in a picture, so this could have been to prevent Brian from getting affected too. I still think he did it to help Peter out, rather than for his own selfish reasons. I mean, they are best friends. I'd also bring up how Brian is still looking for someone he can spend his life with. His love life is pretty central to his character, especially because it appears in so many episodes. He'll question if he'll find someone, when he'll find someone, and how he can find someone. So in terms of Lois, it seems like he's moved on. But I'd still argue Lois is to Brian like Cheryl is to Quagmire, the one who got away. Obviously, she isn't actually that because she and Brian weren't romantic other than marrying each other, but I still think she's someone who Brian can never forget. But maybe this seems like a stretch.
I'm not trying to say that Brian deserves Lois or that I want them to be with each other, because I don't. But I will admit my bias towards Brian may be affecting my judgment.
I mean, why am I forcing Brian into this position and I'm shoving Quagmire away from it? The difference for me, I think, is their morality. Yeah, their morals are kind of screwed now, but I still think it's the key difference between them. Brian seems to have a stronger moral compass than Quagmire, as insane as that sounds. He actually regrets things he does, things he'd say, and occasionally thinks about what he's about to do and if it's actually right. He has morals, and we've seen them, even now. This is slightly unrelated, but Roe v. Wade, a super recent episode, has Stewie call out Brian on his lack of a social conscience. Surprisingly, Brian actually does something pretty selfless by helping women in need get safe abortions. Once it becomes clear that Brian needs to pay taxes for winning the boat, he then comes to the decision to report some of the girls for the money he needs. But he'll still get the majority safe abortions. Yeah, it's cruel for him to even think about reporting any of them, but during this whole conversation, it's made clear that Brian still wants to do good. Maybe I'm just treating him too nicely, but I do think he wants to help people here. He does end up reporting the women, but it's unclear if he reported all of them or not.
But hey, at least he knew what he was doing was wrong, right?
Recent episodes suggest that Brian cares at least a little bit about what's right and wrong. Quagmire is the complete opposite. He knows he is a scumbag, intentionally does scumbag things, and has committed so many crimes that it's terrifying how he's a free man. Quagmire understands morality because he called Brian out, but he does not adhere to morals at all. The only times he does are extremely rare and are really only from later seasons. Even in these later seasons, though, he's still a huge creep. Brian has had morals the whole time, or at least has had them more times than Quagmire ever has. That's why I think Brian stays away from Lois for the most part, because he knows how wrong it is. Interestingly enough, though, Brian's morality is often pushed because of Lois. His invasive comments, him trying to get Lois to cheat on him, or him trying to make something happen, she's always involved.
He's just a horrible person who has morals and somewhat regrets what he does. So much better than Quagmire.
Like Brian said, when you have strong enough feelings for someone, you lose sight of everything else. That's not a lame excuse at all. Lois was the first love interest of his for the audience. Brian's been with other people before, but do any of these names have as much significance as Lois has for Brian? I think no. Brian is most likely able to move on from Lois and find someone else, but I don't think he will. He's sort of destined to be lonely, pining for someone he can never have and a love that he'll never get. That is why I think Lois is the only one for him. His love for her isn't just sexual, it's platonic, since the two of them are close. It's romantic because he enjoys spending time with her and is attracted to her personality. Because of their friendship, I think that's why I feel more comfortable calling Lois Brian's true love rather than Quagmire. Because what suggests that Lois and Quagmire have as close of a relationship that Lois and Brian have? Does anything really suggest a strong relationship for them? That's why, if Lois were to get with either of these two, I think it would be Brian. So, could Brian be her one true love? The obvious statement is no. Duh, she's with Peter. That's the boring answer, though. Then again, other evidence suggests maybe she actually does love him. I wouldn't go as far to say he's her one true love, especially after all we've seen with Peter, but I do think that there's a chance she has romantic feelings towards him. We know that she really does care about him, which is always a good basis for a relationship. I do think they are best friends, especially because they trust each other to be honest and trust each other to keep secrets. Maybe the show isn't explicitly telling us this message, but I do think it's worth pointing out, especially because Lois says she's thought about sleeping with Brian because he has so much in common with her.
Maybe this is just me, but I don't think someone would want to sleep with someone they don't love if the basis is what they have in common.
I get that you can meet up with and sleep with just about anyone, but I think the way Lois speaks about it is much sweeter than a simple one-night stand. She's been close to Brian for a while, so I don't think these thoughts, if she's actually had them, are random. I did reject the idea of them being accurate though, so I'll bring up their marriage yet again. Lois was, in fact, ready to sleep with Brian. I called her out on thinking these thoughts and not acting on them while she was married, but then again, she suggests that she was willing to sleep with him after she already cheated on him with Peter. I still find it incredibly hard to believe that she actually wants to sleep with him though. Their marriage still seems relevant enough though because, again, you don't just marry anyone. I think that Brian stepping up in Peter's absence could have been attractive to Lois. He most likely let her grieve and hopefully never hit on her. Their marriage could be of convenience, but I can believe that Lois was willing to marry Brian as a genuine thing. If he's able to kiss her on the cheek without any problems, I assume Lois allows some intimacy between them. I can't confirm that kisses like the one we see in Perfect Castaway are regular for their marriage, but I still think that she's okay with some intimacy. Lois appreciates Brian, and certainly loves him in a platonic way, but once more seasons come out, both of them change. Lois becomes more hateful towards Brian, and Brian becomes more aggressive and sexual towards Lois. I don't think Lois loved Brian romantically in earlier seasons, but admittedly, they've been really close this whole time. But yeah, in season 2 she said she would never sleep with Brian, even if she didn't remember. I think that speaks enough on whether early seasons Lois loved him. I guess you could argue that the season 6 era could have her love him, but I just don't think enough supports this. Even if she did love him at one point, and I don't think she did, it has long since gone. You wouldn't call someone out on cheating if you wanted to cheat with them. You wouldn't toy with someone who wants to sleep with you if you want to sleep with them. You wouldn't get so aggressive if you truly love that person.
I agree with the obvious. Brian cannot be Lois's one true love. But I don't think it's impossible for Lois to love Brian back romantically.
Coming back to the idea of what the show is rooting for, I find it extremely weird just how common it is for Brian and Quagmire to be used as partners for Lois in alternative stories. I brought up High School English and V is for Mystery earlier, but I haven't talked about Three Directors or Oscar's Guy. Rather than the narrative route for Lois to be with Brian or just not have Peter with Lois, these anthologies actually have us root against Brian and Quagmire. For Three Directors, the Michael Bay parody has Peter come back to his house and see that the mailbox now reads Brian's instead of Griffin's, showing that Brian and Lois are married. Peter is placed in this protagonist role, and while you don't always root for the protagonist, it's clear that we're meant to root for him here. We also see the story pushing Lois back with Peter while Brian gets sidelined. Obviously, the story is poking fun at Michael Bay stuff, so I don't think the show is inherently making us root for Peter to get back with her, since it laughs at Peter too, but since it ends with them together, the message is clear. Oscar's Guy is like the previous examples, where the characters are playing other people rather than themselves, but I still want to bring up two things. For the Silence of the Lambs section, Lois's Clarice Sterling gets sprayed by Capri Sun because of Quagmire.
This was irrelevant to me when I first watched this, but once I learned what it actually was in the movie, yeah, I think it belongs here.
Yes, I've seen every episode of Family Guy and not Silence of the Lambs. Shut up. The other more relevant scene is in the American Beauty part. Lois, who is Peter's wife in this, is caught cheating on him with Quagmire. Yet again, I haven't actually seen American Beauty, which is now making me want to collect a list of movies referenced in or parodied by Family Guy to watch. But since Peter is in the protagonist role and because cheating is not a good thing, we don't actually want Lois and Quagmire together. Even if Peter's character was also unhappy with his marriage and was thinking about cheating. But you get the point. I wonder if putting Quagmire or Brian in these romantic positions with Lois is only done because they love her. Maybe it's the writer suggesting that Lois might love them too? I mean, these cases do differ from the first two, especially in terms of Brian. The show may not be rooting for Brian to be with Lois in Three Directors, but the fact that they seem to be happily married is strangely consistent with what we've seen in the past. Fiends are over the top and ridiculous in this section, but I mean, Lois did end up marrying Brian when Peter was out of the picture. And remember, they aren't characters here like they were in High School English or V is for Mystery. They are just heightened extremes of themselves. I guess what these examples suggest to me is that the show is willing to have Quagmire and Brian be with Lois, but not in a completely canon version. They can't be what we want as an endgame because we expect Peter and Lois to end up together. Sadly, I think these examples don't prove Lois loves either of them, and rather just explains why she's in these positions. 1, she's one of the only main women roles, and 2, they don't care what is canon to Family Guy. It doesn't matter if Lois loves either of them so long as she fits the part. It also could be that her story character cheats, so who would she potentially cheat with? Well, any primary character. And hey, these characters happen to have expressed loving her. This all makes her seem like more of a prop than the other characters, which is unfortunate, but maybe I'm reading too much into this. Still, it's worth considering if the writer's willingness to pair Lois up with these two constantly means anything in terms of how Lois feels about them. I still don't think Lois actually loves Brian, though. And yeah, I don't think Lois loves Quagmire either. Pretty much all the previous reasons I've laid out suggest this. Lois does agree to go out on dates with him, but it's not entirely romantic for her. She went on the first date with him because she felt obliged to, and she went on the second one because she was in a rough place. She was willing to sleep with him, but I don't think it was because deep down she loved him. It was much more likely a one-night stand sort of situation. I also think that the only reason the timeline allowed her to marry him is because of Peter's absence and the fact that Quagmire wasn't acting like himself. Quagmire hasn't exactly been nice to Lois in recent episodes, and since, again, we haven't seen them interact as friends, I really don't think Lois harbors any sort of attraction towards him.
I know I'm arguing for Brian again, and yes, he is a horrible person too, and Lois knows this. But again, it's the closeness between them with Lois that separates them in my head.
Lois knows both of them are horrible people, or at the very least have done horrible things, but the fact that she gets along better with Brian than Quagmire seems important. If Lois really did love Quagmire, I think she would have had a stronger reaction in Hot Pocket Dial, which is the only time Quagmire has called these feelings love. She feels flattered, but she doesn't take it seriously because why should she? Of course she doesn't return his feelings. I do think her advice in her being flattered by this confession is just how she acts rather than her loving him and caring about him. I mean, Lois craves attention. Peter isn't always affectionate, so to know that someone out there potentially loves her makes her feel good about herself. She loves Peter, but she also loves attention.
Just because she wants people to look at her doesn't mean she's in love with them.
So, in my opinion, only Brian loves Lois romantically. Every other case is just platonic feelings, neutral feelings, or creepy obsessions. With the word love constantly thrown around, you'd think these feelings would be stronger and more prominent in the show, but really, I think the small amount we've seen just further supports the lack of love. Anyone can say they love someone and it isn't true, so even if Family Guy doubles down on something like Quagmire loving Lois romantically, I don't buy it. Plus, I think it's way more interesting for the dynamic to look like this. It's an insane love angle with only one of the arrows indicating romantic love. If everyone's feelings towards each other were the same, that would be boring, so I think what Family Guy has done is particularly interesting. Even when ignoring the canon of Family Guy, I genuinely enjoy thinking about Brian and Lois's relationship as something that's one-sided. I think it's uncomfortable to think about Lois cheating, even though she has done it, and I prefer Brian not getting rewarded for bad behavior. With the canon in mind, I still think what they have done is fascinating. I think these relationships they have crafted are so unique and strange and hard to look away from. And you know what? I can accept that I'm wrong. And maybe I'm the only one who really thinks this matters. So, why does this matter? why even bother talking about it? I think it's worth being brought up because it's strange how consistent this is. Quagmire and Brian loving Lois is something that seems to have always been a part of their characters, the one thing that hasn't changed since the beginning. Hypothetically though, it doesn't need to stick around, so why keep it? I think it's a way to keep something from the past. Quagmire lusted after everyone, and he still does. Brian had feelings for Lois, and he still does. In older episodes, Brian was a better person, and his love for Lois was mostly innocent, and Quagmire was being Quagmire. I think this connection to what Family Guy used to be could be the reason why they don't want us to root for Quagmire to be with Lois, but occasionally do root for Brian to be with her. Family Guy is trying to keep what once was. It's sort of like the ship of Theseus. Other parts of the show have been replaced, but what makes the show is still a part of it. Without the context of the past, though, it's hard to root for either of them to succeed. Fans support Quagmire more than Brian, but the writers don't want either of them getting with Lois. Plots still keep coming up with both of them interested in Lois, and I think it's because of the earlier seasons. Despite being a reminder of the past, I think these ideas of romance are underutilized, and in all honesty, I'd say that the very recent years of Family Guy haven't challenged anything like the older seasons have. Most of the episodes you see nowadays are safe, and while they aren't all bad, they don't really change the status quo. These episodes could have been made at any time rather than be a product of their time or an early season episode idea. So even if this is for consistency reasons, I don't think it's all that necessary. That's sort of what makes these relationships so interesting to me. The rarity of these moments, the fact that it isn't used in a way that I think could work, and the fact that it's still in the show. I can think of ways that it can work, probably because I view this stuff in an early season perspective, but realistically, I don't think there's anything else they could do. What else can you do with it at this point? I think these relationships matter for a different reason. We can take Family Guy seriously because it is unserious. That may sound ridiculous, because how could anyone take it seriously? But they are able to deliver a message and clearly take a side on certain issues. It's a show that puts comedy first, but that doesn't mean they don't try to tell their audience anything. They trust you to understand the irony of what they are saying in specific cases. They trust that you have a brain to take in these morals and arguments they present you with. Since ridiculous concepts exist within the show, we are able to take it seriously. Think about it, other shows do this too. For example, South Park has Man-Bear-Pig as a representation of climate change. This ridiculous idea is easy to understand and process because those watching it know what this is referencing. It's funny though, because despite a talking dog that dates women, Family Guy usually keeps the unrealistic stuff to cutaway gags and one-off jokes, unlike South Park, which has plenty of ridiculous things to be the main focus of an episode's plot. It's been pointed out that animation works well with musicals because it is so much easier to suspend your disbelief with animation compared to live action. You can easily picture a talking cartoon shifting to music suddenly because cartoons aren't real, whereas humans don't really shift from talking to singing naturally at all. You are able to suspend your disbelief with Family Guy, allow it to have wacky things happening, and because you suspend your disbelief in terms of a talking dog, you are able to see the beauty and humanity that comes with it. What makes these relationships especially fascinating is Brian's role as a whole. I've brought up how uncomfortable it is to be in the position of Brian or Lois, having a crush on your best friend or knowing that your best friend likes you but you don't return any feelings. But here's why Brian being a dog actually matters. If you've ever been in Brian's position, having an unrequited crush that you just can't let go of, you at least have some kind of escapism. If you go to the same school together, you can avoid them outside of school. If you're texting your crush, you can ask for space and stop messaging them. But Brian has no way to avoid seeing Lois. He literally shares a house with her. Although I'd argue that people can still just be friends after one person rejects the other's romantic feelings, others would disagree with that notion, and I completely get it when it comes to this situation. Brian is subjected to constantly seeing his crush happily in love with his own best friend. If that isn't going to torment a person, I don't know what will. Because he is the family pet, because he has to live in this house since he has nowhere else to go, he is put in this position that I haven't seen any other character in. If he wasn't a dog, this sort of story couldn't be told. And the show is showing us that Brian has more humanity in him than his best friend married to his crush, especially in earlier seasons. It's unironically really tragic. Can more people please write fanfics of them? I want to read them. Animation matters when it comes to Brian and Lois because of the storylines and jokes Family Guy makes. The jokes where Brian acts creepy towards Lois, as much as I hate to admit it, are relevant because he is a dog. I don't find these jokes funny, but there's a reason why Brian does these things. It's what a dog would do. These scenes would not be the same, and probably would be written completely differently, if that part of Brian wasn't there. With Quagmire, animation lends well to him too. He can sleep with anyone or anything, and we can suspend our disbelief easily when he's doing insane things. This timeline I constructed for him is inconsistent because animation allows for an insane timeline to exist. That's probably not as satisfying as an answer as Brian's, but I think it's because Quagmire is a human. Animation matters for their rivalry too, because Quagmire is a cat person. If Brian wasn't a dog, part of their conflict wouldn't work as well as it does now. It's important for the story for things to be like this. I do think that because Quagmire is very obviously a fiend, based on his insane actions only possible in animation, it's clear to know the danger that anyone he is with is in, which is why we aren't supposed to root for him being with anyone. We can side with Brian from time to time because Family Guy can focus on the best parts of Brian. He is a main character after all. The show doesn't support him when he is acting just like Quagmire. It is funny how people hate Brian when he acts like Quagmire and tend to not hate Quagmire at all though. Obviously the writers don't really like him anymore either, but because these storylines tie into earlier episodes, it's why Brian can be supported. These rules Family Guy has set up and the consistency throughout the show do matter and actually impact the story. Brian being a talking dog is what makes this work. That's how you tell a story, and Family Guy is able to expand on this idea in creative ways. Brian being a dog expands to things like what rights he has, what it means to kill a dog, and how Brian is oppressed in what we can assume is most universes. Things have certainly changed on Family Guy, but this particular aspect has not. Brian is still a dog. This might have people asking the question, why would you still take a show like Family Guy seriously? You aren't meant to after all. I disagree with that idea. To prove that, I'd like to play a clip from Seth MacFarlane's own mouth.
When I started the show, my attitude was like, it doesn't matter, none of it matters. It's like, it's funny, let's do it. And the older I've gotten, I look back at shows that we've done, and I'm like, gosh, I guess it's a little more complicated than that, isn't it?
This was referring to the jokes the show used to make, but I think it applies to the storylines and lore too. Family Guy is more serious and complicated than it lets on. People criticize episodes that play things completely straight because it's Family Guy. When Family Guy tries so hard, it doesn't work. But again, we can take it seriously because it's unserious. When it's more simple, it's beautiful. The characters don't need to become more serious to tell a message. It succeeds when the characters are the same unserious selves that they are. Family Guy actually cares about tackling serious issues, and that's why one of them has been banned from airing. I think that yes, comedy comes before everything else for Family Guy, but when you look back and analyze the show, it's more than just the jokes. While I agree that Family Guy has lost its passion, and I do want the show to end despite it still being somewhat enjoyable to me, I still think Family Guy can be impactful. Modern Family Guy has stomped on what once was, but I still think they are able to create amazing stories. Hell, a few of the episodes I adore are from the more recent seasons. I also appreciate the lore that exists within the show. Obviously, I wouldn't be making this video if I didn't. I think Family Guy can put in effort, and I genuinely believe they put effort into the relationships they've written. I like focusing on what once was. I appreciate the older episodes that set things up for the entire show's existence. It can be hard to watch the new episodes now, but I don't want to completely write it off. That's why I don't want other people to write off Family Guy either. I think Family Guy has heart because if it didn't, we wouldn't have the moments that make up my edits. People wouldn't feel affected by these characters if this was all meaningless. People wouldn't like these characters if nothing truly mattered on the show. Family Guy isn't some masterpiece, but it's able to be its own thing with its own identity. It has its own way of telling stories. It has its own sound influenced by big band, Hollywood, and the Rat Pack. And it has its own unique characters that impact the story. Despite its faults, I truly think that this aspect of Family Guy, the love that Brian, Lois, and Quagmire have, is incredibly interesting and proves that Family Guy is more than just laughs. It's not only interesting because nobody else has done it, but because this concept only works with what Family Guy has set up.
Thank you all so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. This took me so long. I started working on this in March of 2024, so a year, 8 months ago, and like, to see where it is now is just amazing to me. I really wanted to complete this because I never complete any of my projects, so I really wanted to like prove to myself that like I could do this, and I did it. It's here. I think another thing is like I always get stressed out in my head about my projects, so I'm kind of at the point where I think this project sucks. So if you hate it, you can tell me. I won't feel good about it, but you know, be honest with me. I'd really appreciate to know how you guys feel about it, and maybe I'll make more of these in the future, but for now, I kind of want to take it easy because this took so much out of me. And it's like, wow, all my projects are going to be like this, I guess. I have other ideas for videos, of course, but this is the first time I've really done something like this, a 2-hour video, so I'm really nervous to see how this comes out, and I think this might influence whatever content I post on here, so yeah. Again, thank you for watching. Thank you for taking the time to get here. I'm grateful that I got this done. I love Family Guy. I love making edits. I now might even like making videos, even though they take a long time. So yeah, again, thank you for sticking around. I really appreciate it. Bye!